24-year-old Serena Vale steps into a smoke-filled boardroom, desperate for a job that could save her drowning family. 12 men in tailored suits discuss million-dollar deals with the precision of predators. At the head of the table sits Lucien Moretti, the untouchable king of Manhattan's underground empire. The moment Serena enters, Lucien looks at her and keeps looking. For 10 unbearable seconds, the room disappears. His gray eyes lock onto her crimson lips with dangerous intensity. He cancels every meeting, drags her into his office, and delivers a chilling warning. You walked into my world wearing a target. Follow this story to the end, hit like, and comment your city so I can see how far this journey reaches. Serena's hand trembled against the brass handle of the conference room door. Through the frosted glass, she could see shadows moving, men in expensive suits, the kind that cost more than her family's monthly mortgage. She pressed her palm flat against the door, trying to stop the shaking. It didn't work. The receptionist had told her to wait. But Serena had already been waiting for 3 weeks. 3 weeks since her father's medical bills started arriving in envelopes so thick they felt like death sentences. 3 weeks since the bank threatened foreclosure. 3 weeks since her mother stopped sleeping. She pushed the door open. 12 pairs of eyes turned toward her. The room smelled like Cuban cigars and something darker. Old money mixed with older sins. Crystal decanters lined a mahogany sidebar. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked Manhattan like the city was a chessboard waiting to be conquered. But Serena's focus narrowed to the man at the head of the table. Lucien Moretti sat perfectly still, his gray eyes cutting through the smoke like surgical blades. He wore a black suit that probably cost what her family owed the hospital. His dark hair was swept back, revealing a face that belonged on ancient Roman coins, all sharp angles and aristocratic brutality. He was younger than she expected, maybe 32, maybe dangerous in ways she couldn't begin to understand. "Mr. Moretti," she started, her voice steadier than she felt. "I'm here for the executive assistant position. The agency sent me." "Get out!" The words came from somewhere to her left, a barrel-chested man with scarred knuckles and a voice like grinding gravel. Serena didn't look at him. She kept her eyes locked on Lucien. "I have an appointment," she said. "You had an appointment," the scarred man corrected. 2 hours ago. You're late." "The subway. We don't care about your excuses." Another voice, this one dripping with contempt. "Turn around. Walk away. Save yourself the embarrassment." Serena's fingers clenched into fists. She'd taken 2 trains and a bus to get here. She'd borrowed this black dress from her roommate Maya, along with the crimson lipstick that now felt like war paint against her mouth. She'd practiced her interview answers until 3 in the morning. She wasn't leaving. "Mr. Moretti," she said again, directing her words solely to the man who hadn't spoken. "I understand I'm late. I apologize. But I'm also the most qualified candidate you'll interview today. I have a master's degree in business administration, 5 years of executive support experience, and I speak 4 languages. I can start immediately. I don't need training, and I work harder than anyone you'll ever meet because I don't have the luxury of failing." Silence dropped over the room like a guillotine blade. Lucien still hadn't moved. He sat there, one hand resting on the table, the other holding a fountain pen that probably cost more than her degree. His gray eyes traveled slowly from her borrowed heels up to the crimson lipstick she'd applied in the building's lobby bathroom. Then he looked at her eyes and kept looking. Serena felt something shift in her chest, a strange vertigo, like standing at the edge of a cliff she hadn't known existed. The air between them seemed to thicken, charged with electricity that had nothing to do with the conversation and everything to do with the way Lucien Moretti was staring at her like she was a problem he couldn't solve. 1 second. 2, 5, 10. Nobody moved. Nobody breathed. Then Lucien's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. He set down the fountain pen with precise, controlled movements. "Gentlemen," he said quietly, "we're done here." The scarred man frowned. "Sir, we still have the DeLuca account to—" "I said we're done." Lucien's voice didn't rise. It didn't need to. Every man in the room stood immediately, gathering papers and phones with the synchronized efficiency of soldiers dismissing from formation. They filed past Serena without looking at her. She pressed herself against the doorframe, suddenly aware she'd just derailed a meeting she didn't understand. The last man out, elderly with silver hair and calculating eyes, paused beside her. "Good luck," he murmured. It didn't sound like a blessing. Then the door clicked shut, and Serena was alone with Lucien Moretti. He rose from his chair. 6'2", maybe 6'3". The kind of height that made the expensive suit look like armor. He moved around the table with the fluid grace of a predator, each step measured and deliberate. Serena's survival instinct screamed at her to run. She stayed. Lucien stopped 3 feet away. Up close, she could see the tiny imperfections that made him human. A thin scar cutting through his left eyebrow, faint shadows under his eyes suggesting he didn't sleep much, the barely visible tension in his shoulders like he was carrying weight nobody else could see. "What's your name?" he asked. "Serena Vale." "Serena Vale." He repeated it slowly, like he was testing how it felt in his mouth. "The agency sent you." "Yes." "Why do you need this job?" The question caught her off guard. Most interviewers asked about strengths and weaknesses, past experience, 5-year plans. Nobody asked why you needed the job. That was supposed to be obvious. "My father," she said carefully. "He's sick." "The medical bills." "How sick?" Serena hesitated. "Stage 4 pancreatic cancer." Lucien's expression didn't change. "Time frame?" 6 months, maybe less. "And you think working here will help?" It wasn't a question, but Serena answered anyway. "The salary listed would cover his treatment. It would save our house. It would let my mother stop working 3 jobs. So yes, Mr. Moretti, I think working here would help." "You have no idea what you're asking for." "I'm asking for employment, paid employment. I'll earn every cent." "This isn't a normal company, Miss Vale. I gathered that when 12 men in $1,000 suits went silent because you told them to." A flicker of something crossed Lucien's face. Amusement, maybe, or warning. "You're observant." "I'm desperate. Desperate people notice things. Desperate people also make mistakes. Then hire someone less desperate." The words came out sharper than she intended. Lucien's eyes narrowed fractionally, but instead of anger, Serena saw something else. Interest, the dangerous kind. He moved closer. Serena forced herself not to step back. "That lipstick," Lucien said quietly. "Why did you wear it?" The question was so unexpected that Serena answered honestly. "My roommate said it makes me look powerful." "Your roommate was wrong." Heat flushed through Serena's cheeks. "Then it makes you look reckless." Lucien's voice dropped lower. "Like you don't understand the rules of the game you just entered. Red lips in a room full of wolves, Miss Vale. That's not power. That's a target." Serena's pulse hammered in her throat. "I don't scare easily." "You should. Are you trying to frighten me away from the job?" "I'm trying to give you a chance to walk out that door before you understand what this place really is." "And if I don't take that chance?" Lucien stared at her for a long moment. Then he turned and walked to the windows overlooking Manhattan. The city stretched below them, all steel and glass and desperate ambition. "Moretti Dominion," he said, his back to her, "is not listed on any stock exchange. We don't have shareholders. We don't answer to regulatory boards. On paper, we're a private investment firm managing real estate portfolios and venture capital. In reality, we're the financial heart of something much older, much darker." Serena's mouth went dry. "You're telling me this why?" "Because if you take this job, you'll learn it anyway. Better to know now. Better to run while you still can." "I'm not running." Lucien turned from the window. The afternoon light cut across his face, throwing half of it into shadow. 3 families control this city, Miss Vale. The Morettis. The DeLucas. The Constantines. We've been at war for generations over territory, money, and power. Moretti Dominion is how I keep my family funded, how I keep us alive. Every contract we sign, every deal we broker, every dollar we move, it's all built on a foundation you don't want to examine too closely. Your mafia. That's a word people use when they don't understand the complexity of what we do. But yes, functionally, that's what I am. Serena should have been terrified. She should have grabbed her borrowed purse and run for the elevators. Instead, she heard herself say, "Does the job still pay $90,000 a year?" Lucien laughed, a short, sharp sound without humor. "You're either incredibly brave or phenomenally stupid." I'm practical. You need an assistant. I need money. Whether you're moving legal investments or illegal ones doesn't change my ability to manage your calendar and draft your correspondence. You think it's that simple? I think you're trying very hard to scare me away, which means you either don't want to hire me at all, or you're testing whether I'll break. Either way, I'm still here. Lucien crossed the room in 3 strides. Suddenly, he was close. Too close. Serena could smell his cologne, something dark and expensive like cedar and gunpowder. She tilted her chin up, refusing to retreat. "Here's what happens if I hire you," Lucien said, his voice barely above a whisper. "You work directly for me, nobody else. You don't talk to my men without permission. You don't leave this building without an escort. You don't make copies of anything. You don't ask questions about files marked red. You don't repeat anything you overhear. You exist in my shadow, and you pray that shadow is thick enough to keep you safe from the people who would love to hurt me by hurting you. Why would anyone want to hurt you through me? Because the moment you walked into this room wearing that lipstick, I looked at you, and I kept looking, and every man at that table noticed." Serena's breath caught. "I don't understand. In my world, weakness is fatal. Distraction is worse. I just canceled a meeting worth $8 million because I couldn't stop staring at your mouth. Do you comprehend what that signals? What that makes you? A liability. A target." Lucien's gray eyes burned into hers. "The most dangerous thing you could possibly be." Serena's heart slammed against her ribs. She should leave. She should thank him for his honesty and walk away from whatever lethal game she'd stumbled into. But she thought about her father, wasting away in a hospital bed they couldn't afford. Her mother's hollow eyes. The foreclosure notice on the kitchen table. "When do I start?" she asked. Lucien stared at her like she'd just signed her own death warrant. Maybe she had. "Tomorrow," he said finally. 6 a.m. Wear something less distracting. "Anything else?" "Yes." He stepped back, putting distance between them, but his eyes never left her face. "Don't fall in love with me, Miss Vale. I destroy everything I care about. It's not a metaphor. It's a warning." Then he turned and walked out of the conference room, leaving Serena alone with the cigar smoke and the terrifying realization that she'd just agreed to work for a man who could probably kill her with a phone call. She looked down at her hands. They were shaking again. But this time, it wasn't from fear. Serena arrived at Moretti Dominion at 5:47 a.m. the next morning. The building looked different in the pre-dawn darkness, less like a corporate headquarters and more like a fortress. Security cameras tracked her from the moment she stepped out of the cab. A man in a black suit appeared at the door before she could reach for the handle. "Miss Vale," he said. It wasn't a question. "12th floor. Mr. Moretti is waiting." The elevator ride felt like descending into deep water. Serena watched the numbers climb, each floor taking her further from the world she understood. She'd worn a navy dress, conservative, professional, forgettable. No crimson lipstick, just clear gloss and the hope that she could survive whatever came next. The 12th floor was silent. Thick carpet absorbed her footsteps. The walls were decorated with abstract art that probably cost more than her student loans. At the end of a long hallway, double doors stood open. Serena stepped through. Lucien's office was enormous, floor-to-ceiling windows on 2 walls, a desk the size of her childhood bedroom, leather furniture that smelled like old money. But what caught her attention was the wall of monitors behind the desk, each one displaying different security camera feeds. She could see the building lobby, the parking garage, the conference room from yesterday, even the street outside. Lucien sat at his desk, reading something on a tablet. He didn't look up. "Coffee," he said. "Black. 2 sugars. There's a machine in the anteroom." Serena found the anteroom, a smaller office connected to his, already set up with a desk, computer, and filing cabinets. The coffee machine was Italian, complicated. It took her 3 tries to get it right. When she returned, Lucien was on the phone. "I don't care what Vittorio thinks," he said coldly. "The contract was clear. If he can't deliver by Friday, the deal's off." A pause. "Then let him be insulted. I'm not his friend. I'm his competition." He hung up without saying goodbye. Took the coffee from Serena without meeting her eyes. "Sit." She sat. Lucien slid a leather portfolio across the desk. "Confidentiality agreement. Read every word, sign the last page." Serena opened the portfolio. The document was 12 pages long, dense with legal language, but certain phrases jumped out. Irreparable harm, criminal liability, termination with extreme prejudice. What does that last part mean? She asked, pointing. It means if you betray me, the lawyers are the least of your problems. Serena's pen hovered over the signature line. This was it, her last chance to walk away. She thought about her father's laugh, the way it used to fill their kitchen before cancer stole his voice. She thought about her mother's hands, raw from hospital sanitizer and night shifts. She signed. Lucien took the portfolio without comment. Your salary is $90,000 annually, paid bi-weekly. Health insurance starts immediately. You'll need it. There's a phone in your desk, encrypted. Use it for all work communication. Your personal phone stays in your purse. Never take photos in this building. Never record conversations. Never remove documents from the premises. Understood. You'll arrive before me every morning. You'll leave after me every evening. Your job is to know my schedule better than I do, anticipate problems before they occur, and ensure nothing interrupts my focus unless it's actively on fire. What about lunch breaks? You eat at your desk. There's a kitchen on this floor. Use it. Days off? Sundays. Unless I need you. Serena absorbed this. Basically, she'd just sold her life. Anything else? Lucien's eyes finally met hers. Marco will be your driver. You don't go anywhere without him. Not to lunch, not to the bathroom, not home. I don't need a driver. You need protection. Marco provides it. From what? From the people who noticed me looking at you yesterday. Lucien stood and walked to the windows. Dawn was breaking over Manhattan, painting the sky in shades of blood orange and ash. I have enemies, Miss Vale. They're creative, patient. They understand that the fastest way to hurt me is through the people He paused. Through the people around me. You barely know me. That won't matter to them. Serena felt ice creep down her spine. This is insane. Yes, Lucien turned from the window. But you signed the agreement. You're mine now. And I protect what's mine. The possessiveness in his voice should have frightened her. Instead, it sent heat curling through her stomach. Dangerous, unwanted heat that had nothing to do with fear and everything to do with the way Lucien Moretti looked at her like she was a problem he couldn't solve. Show me what I need to do, Serena said quietly. Lucien studied her for a long moment. Then he nodded toward the anteroom. Your computer password is taped under the keyboard. Calendar access is already configured. I have a meeting at 9 with our legal team, another at 11 with the Constantine family representative, and lunch with a city councilman who's forgotten who owns him. Make sure I have files ready for each. Where are the files? Figure it out. He sat back down at his desk, dismissing her. Serena returned to her new office, found the password, logged in. The calendar was a nightmare, color-coded meetings stacked back-to-back for weeks. She started digging through the file server, trying to understand the organization system. 2 hours later, she'd assembled 3 briefing packets, and hadn't found lunch reservation details for the councilman meeting. She knocked on Lucien's door. He was reading financial reports, a pencil between his teeth. The councilman lunch, Serena said. Where? Il Gattopardo, 1 p.m. table under Romano. Romano? Not Moretti. I don't advertise. Serena nodded, filed that away. Smart, dangerous men stayed hidden. She returned to her desk and spent the rest of the morning learning the rhythm of Lucien's world. Phone calls came in constantly. Some he took, most he ignored. People appeared at the door with urgent messages, which Serena screened according to instinct, since Lucien hadn't bothered to give her actual instructions. At 8:55, 4 men in suits arrived for the legal meeting. Serena showed them in, distributed the files she'd prepared, then retreated to her desk. Through the open door, she could hear fragments of conversation. DeLuca family is contesting ownership of the Brooklyn warehouses. Offshore accounts are clean, but the federal audit could expose, need to move the cash before the end of the quarter. Serena focused on her computer screen, pretending she wasn't listening. But every word sank into her memory like stones into deep water. This wasn't a business. It was a machine built to wash blood off money. At 11 o'clock, a woman arrived for the Constantine meeting. Tall, elegant, with silver hair and eyes like broken glass. She looked at Serena with the assessment of a jeweler examining a fake diamond. New assistant, she said to Lucien, not bothering to lower her voice. Younger than the last one. Prettier, too. Is that wise? Careful, Elena. Lucien's voice carried a blade's edge. Your concern sounds like jealousy. Elena laughed, cold and sharp. I'm too old to be jealous of girls who don't know what they're walking into. She disappeared into Lucien's office. The door closed. Serena tried to focus on scheduling, but her hands were shaking. She understood now. This job wasn't about managing calendars. It was about surviving proximity to a man who lived in permanent war. At 12:45, Lucien emerged. We're leaving. For the councilman lunch? You're coming. Serena blinked. I thought, bring your phone. Take notes. She grabbed her purse and followed Lucien to the elevator. The ride down was silent. In the lobby, a black SUV waited, engine running. Marco stood beside it, the barrel-chested man from yesterday's meeting, the one with scarred knuckles. Miss Vale, he said with a curt nod. Serena slid into the back seat. Lucien followed, leaving less than 6 inches between them. The SUV pulled into traffic. Why am I coming? Serena asked. Because Councilman Harris likes to pretend he's untouchable. Bringing a witness reminds him he's not. I'm the witness? You're the reminder that I could destroy his career with a single phone call. Your presence makes that threat tangible. Serena processed this. So I'm a prop. Your leverage. Learn the difference. Il Gattopardo was a restaurant for people who didn't need to look at prices. Marble floors, crystal chandeliers, waiters who moved like dancers. The maitre d' recognized Lucien instantly, led them to a private room in the back. Councilman Harris was already seated, 50-something, soft around the middle, sweating despite the air conditioning. He stood when they entered, extending a hand. Lucien, good to see you. Lucien ignored the hand, sat down. Serena sat beside him. Harris's smile faltered. And who's this? My assistant. She takes notes. I see. Harris looked at Serena with naked discomfort. Perhaps we should speak privately. We are speaking privately. Lucien's tone could have cut steel. Unless you'd prefer I schedule our next conversation in your office, with your wife present. Harris went pale. He sat down heavily. That won't be necessary. Serena pulled out her phone, opened a notes app, and waited. The zoning permits, Lucien said without preamble. Where are they? The committee is still reviewing. I paid you 6 months ago. The review should be complete. These things take time. You're stalling. Why? Harris shifted in his seat. DeLuca made an offer, a competing offer for the same land. Lucien went very still. Serena felt the temperature in the room drop 10 degrees. What kind of offer? Lucien asked quietly. Double what you paid, plus a construction contract for his nephew. And you're considering it. I have to consider all options. No. Lucien leaned forward. You have to deliver what I purchased. That's how this works. I own you, Harris. The moment you took my money, you became mine. If you think Vittorio De Luca will protect you when I release the recordings of our previous conversations, you're stupider than I thought. Harris's face crumbled. Please, he'll kill me if I refuse him. And I'll kill you if you betray me. Choose wisely. The words were delivered with such casual certainty that Serena's fingers froze over her phone. This wasn't a negotiation. It was an execution deferred. Harris's hands trembled as he reached for his water glass. The permits will be ready by Friday. Good, Lucien stood. Enjoy your lunch. It's already paid for. He walked out without another word. Serena followed, her pulse hammering. In the SUV, Lucien made a phone call. I need surveillance on Councilman Harris, full package. If he contacts DeLuca, I want to know immediately. He hung up, then looked at Serena. What did you think? Of what? The meeting. Serena chose her words carefully. You threatened to kill a city official in front of a witness. I threatened to kill a corrupt official who's stealing from me. Context matters. I'm the witness. Doesn't that worry you? Lucien's gray eyes studied her face. No. Why not? Because you need this job more than you need a clear conscience. And because I think you're starting to understand that the world isn't divided into good and evil. It's divided into power, and everyone else. Serena looked out the window at Manhattan rushing past. That's a bleak worldview. It's an honest one. They rode in silence back to Moretti Dominion. When they arrived, Lucien disappeared into his office without explanation. Serena sat at her desk, staring at the notes she'd taken. Double what you paid, plus a construction contract for his nephew. I own you, Harris. I'll kill you if you betray me. She should quit. She should walk out right now and find a normal job with a normal boss who didn't casually threaten murder over lunch. But Serena thought about her father's hospital bills, the foreclosure notice, her mother's exhausted face. She saved the notes, encrypted the file, got back to work. 2 weeks passed in a blur of meetings, phone calls, and slowly decoding the architecture of Lucien's empire. Serena learned that Moretti Dominion had fingers in everything: real estate developments, shipping companies, construction firms, even a chain of high-end restaurants. On paper, it all looked legitimate. Beneath the surface, every contract connected back to the three families controlling Manhattan's underworld. She also learned that Lucien never stopped working. He arrived before dawn and left after midnight. He ate at his desk. He took calls at 2 a.m. without complaint. The exhaustion showed in the shadows under his eyes, the tension in his shoulders, the way he rubbed his temples when he thought nobody was watching. And he watched Serena constantly, not obviously, not inappropriately, but she felt his attention like pressure against her skin, the way his eyes followed her when she walked past his office, the way conversations paused when she entered a room, the way he found excuses to call her into meetings that didn't require an assistant's presence. It should have made her uncomfortable. Instead, it made her hyper-aware of him, the precise way he moved, the dark timbre of his voice, the intelligence burning behind those gray eyes. Lucien Moretti was terrifying. He was also the most compelling person Serena had ever met. On Friday of her second week, everything changed. Serena was filing contracts when Lucien's door slammed open. He stood in the doorway, his face carved from ice. "Get Marco, now!" Serena grabbed her phone, texted the driver. "What's wrong?" "Vittorio De Luca just called. He's accusing me of stealing $2 million from a shared account." Lucien's jaw clenched. "It's a setup. He's creating justification for retaliation." Retaliation for what? For taking something he thinks belongs to him. Before Serena could ask what that meant, Marco appeared. "Sir?" "We're going to De Luca's office. Bring full security." Marco's expression went flat. "Is that wise?" "I don't have a choice. If I refuse the meeting, it looks like admission of guilt." Lucien turned to Serena. "You're staying here. You just said I'm supposed to go everywhere with Marco. This is different." "How?" "Because if De Luca's planning what I think he's planning, anyone near me becomes collateral damage." Understanding hit Serena like cold water. "You think he'll kill you?" "I think he'll try." Lucien grabbed his jacket from the office, checked something inside it. Serena caught a glimpse of leather, realized with sick certainty it was a shoulder holster, then headed for the elevator. Serena made a decision she'd probably regret. She followed. "Miss Vale," Marco started. "I'm his assistant," Serena said firmly. "If he's walking into danger, I'm taking notes." Lucien spun around. "Absolutely not. You said I go where you go. I said Marco protects you, which he can't do if you're in the middle of a war zone." "Then don't go." "I have to." "Then so do I." They stared at each other. Marco looked between them like he was watching a bomb countdown. Finally, Lucien's expression shifted into something between fury and resignation. "If you die, it's not my fault." "Agreed. Stay behind me. Don't speak. Don't look at anyone directly." "Understood." Lucien swore under his breath in Italian. Then he turned and walked into the elevator. Serena followed, her heart trying to climb out of her throat. The ride to De Luca's office took 20 minutes. Serena spent it watching Lucien's reflection in the SUV's window. His face was completely still, but his hands kept flexing, unconscious preparation for violence. They pulled up to a building in Midtown, older than Moretti Dominion, but somehow more menacing. 4 men in suits waited outside. De Luca's men. Marco stopped the SUV. "Sir, this is a trap." "I know." Lucien opened the door. They walked inside. Lucien first, then Serena, then Marco, and 3 other security men whose names Serena hadn't learned. The lobby was empty. Their footsteps echoed on marble floors. An elevator waited, doors open. Lucien stepped inside. Serena followed before Marco could stop her. The doors closed. The elevator climbed. "When we get there," Lucien said quietly, "stay by the door. If shooting starts, run." "Where?" "Anywhere that's not here." The elevator dinged, doors opened. They stepped into a penthouse office that made Lucien's look modest. Vittorio De Luca stood by floor-to-ceiling windows, backlit by afternoon sun. He was older than Lucien, maybe 45, with silver threading through his dark hair and the kind of smile that never reached his eyes. "Lucien," he said warmly, "thank you for coming." "Let's skip the pleasantries, Vittorio. Where's my money?" De Luca's smile widened. "Your money? That's interesting. I was about to ask you the same question. The shared account had $4 million last week. This morning it had $2 million. You're the only other person with access." "Actually, that's not quite true." De Luca's eyes slid past Lucien to Serena. "Who's this?" "My assistant. She's very pretty. New? 2 weeks?" De Luca walked closer, studying Serena like she was a painting at auction. "And in those 2 weeks, did she happen to access any of your financial accounts?" Lucien's voice dropped to a lethal whisper. "Careful. I'm simply asking a question. You're accusing me of theft. I'm suggesting alternative explanations." "Serena doesn't have access to those accounts." "Are you certain? Because someone with your login credentials transferred $2 million to an offshore account in the Caymans 3 days ago. If it wasn't you, and it wasn't me..." He let the implication hang. Serena's blood turned to ice. This was it, the trap. De Luca wasn't accusing Lucien of stealing. He was framing Serena. Lucien must have reached the same conclusion because his whole body went rigid. "If you're suggesting..." "I'm not suggesting anything. I'm stating facts." De Luca pulled out a tablet, showed them a screen. Transaction records. Lucien's digital signature. Transfer authorization. All pointing to Serena. "This is fabricated," Lucien said flatly. "Is it? Or did you simply hire the wrong assistant?" "She's been with me for 2 weeks. She doesn't know how to access secure servers. Maybe she had help." De Luca's eyes glittered with malice. "Maybe someone taught her. Someone who wanted to drive a wedge between our families." "Who?" "The Constantines. Elena's been very interested in your new hire. Multiple inquiries about her background, her family, her finances." Lucien's jaw clenched. Serena could see him working through the implications. If the Constantines were involved, this wasn't just about money. It was about starting a war between the Morettis and De Lucas while they watched from the sidelines. "I want proof," Lucien said. "I want my money," De Luca countered. $2 million. By Monday. Or this becomes a very different conversation. "And if I don't believe you?" De Luca's smile vanished. "Then your new assistant becomes an example of what happens to thieves in my city." The threat hung in the air like poison gas. Lucien moved so fast Serena almost missed it. 1 step forward, hand inside his jacket. Marco and the other security men reacted instantly, drawing weapons. De Luca's guards flooded in from hidden doors, at least 8 of them, all armed. 12 guns pointing at each other across an executive office. Serena stopped breathing. "You touch her," Lucien said with deadly calm, "and I burn your entire family to ash." De Luca didn't flinch. "Then return what she stole." "She didn't steal anything." "Prove it." They stared at each other across the barrel of multiple guns. Serena's vision started to tunnel. This was how she died, caught in crossfire between mafia families over money she'd never seen. Then Lucien did something unexpected. He lowered his gun, holstered it. "Stand down," he ordered his men. Marco looked like he'd been slapped. "Sir, stand down." Slowly, reluctantly, the Moretti security lowered their weapons. De Luca gestured, and his guards did the same. "I'll find your money," Lucien said to Vittorio. "But I'm keeping my assistant. If you come near her, if you so much as look at her wrong, the truce between our families ends. Permanently." De Luca considered this, then he nodded. "Monday, $2 million. Don't disappoint me, Lucien." Lucien turned and walked toward the elevator. Serena followed, her legs barely functioning. Marco and the security team formed a protective wall around them. The elevator doors closed. Nobody spoke during the descent. In the SUV, Lucien made a single phone call. I need forensic accountants. Immediately. Someone frame my assistant for embezzlement. Find out who. He hung up. Looked at Serena. Are you hurt? She shook her head, not trusting her voice. Good. Lucien's expression was unreadable. Because you just became the center of a war you don't understand, and I need to figure out how to keep you alive through it. Serena finally found words. Why did you defend me? You barely know me. Lucien stared out the window at Manhattan's twilight skyline. When he spoke, his voice was rough, almost vulnerable. Because the moment you walked into my world wearing red lipstick, I made you mine. And I don't let anyone hurt what's mine, even if it destroys everything I've built. The confession hit Serena like a physical blow, not because it was romantic, but because it was a death sentence for both of them. In Lucien's world, caring about someone was the most dangerous thing you could do, and he just announced to his greatest enemy that he cared about her. The SUV's tires hissed against wet pavement as rain began to fall over Manhattan. Serena pressed her forehead against the cool window, watching droplets race sideways across the glass. Her hands were still shaking. She folded them in her lap, willing them to stop. Lucien sat beside her in silence, his jaw clenched so tight she could see the muscle jumping beneath his skin. He'd made 3 more phone calls since leaving DeLuca's building, each one clipped, brutal, demanding answers nobody seemed to have. Marco drove with the focused intensity of a man navigating a minefield. The other security vehicles flanked them front and back, turning their convoy into a moving fortress. Where are we going? Serena finally asked. Somewhere safe. Your office isn't safe? Not anymore. Lucien's voice was flat, emotionless, the kind of control that came from years of practice. If DeLuca knows enough to frame you, he knows enough to have people inside my building. We need to disappear until I understand who I can trust. Serena absorbed this. You think someone on your staff is working for him? I know someone is. The question is who? The SUV turned down a side street, then another, weaving through neighborhoods Serena didn't recognize. Brooklyn, maybe? Somewhere the buildings pressed closer together and the streetlights threw shadows like prison bars. They stopped in front of a brownstone sandwiched between a bodega and a laundromat. It looked forgotten, paint peeling, windows dark, iron gate rusted at the hinges. Lucien got out. Serena followed. Sir, Marco said quietly. I should clear it first. No. Stay with the vehicles. Watch the street. Marco's scarred face tightened with worry, but he nodded. Lucien unlocked the gate with a key that looked older than Serena. The hinges screamed. He led her up crumbling steps to a heavy oak door, unlocked 3 separate deadbolts, and pushed it open. Inside smelled like dust and old wood and something faintly floral that Serena couldn't identify. Lucien flipped a light switch. A single bulb illuminated a narrow hallway lined with faded wallpaper showing pastoral scenes. Shepherds, sheep, rolling hills. What is this place? Serena asked. My grandmother's house. Lucien locked the door behind them, engaged all 3 deadbolts, then added a chain. She died 8 years ago, left it to me. Nobody knows I own it, not even most of my men. He moved through the house with practiced familiarity, turning on lights, checking windows. Serena followed him into a living room frozen in time, doilies on the furniture, photographs in ornate frames, a piano covered with a white sheet. Lucien pulled the sheet off the piano, revealing dark mahogany. His fingers brushed the keys without pressing them. She used to play Chopin, he said quietly. Every morning. I'd sit right there. He nodded toward a faded armchair, and listen while I ate breakfast. It was the most personal thing he'd ever told her. Serena didn't know how to respond. Lucien seemed to realize he'd revealed too much. His expression shuddered. There's a bedroom upstairs, first door on the right. You'll stay there tonight. And you? I'll be working. Lucien, don't. He turned to face her, and the exhaustion in his eyes was staggering. Don't ask me how I'm feeling. Don't try to comfort me. Don't pretend this is anything other than what it is. A disaster I created by being stupid enough to let you matter. The words hit like a slap. I didn't ask to matter. No. You just walked into my boardroom wearing red lipstick and refused to leave when I gave you the chance. Now Vittorio De Luca knows the fastest way to hurt me is through you, and I have 48 hours to find $2 million that may or may not exist while figuring out which of my own people betrayed me. So this is my fault. This is my fault for forgetting the first rule of survival. Never care about anything someone can take from you. Serena's throat tightened. Then fire me. Send me home. Problem solved. It's too late for that. DeLuca's already marked you. Firing you just makes you easier to kill. Then what do you want from me? Lucien crossed the room in 3 strides, stopped close enough that Serena could smell the rain on his jacket and see the flecks of amber in his gray eyes. I want you to stay alive, he said roughly. I want you to stop looking at me like I'm something other than a monster. I want to rewind 2 weeks and tell my receptionist to throw away your resume. But mostly, I want to figure out how to keep breathing when every instinct I have is screaming at me to lock you in this house and burn down everyone who's ever thought about hurting you. His intensity was overwhelming. Serena forced herself to hold his gaze. I'm not afraid of you, she whispered. You should be. Why? Because you threaten people? Because you carry a gun? Because you're mafia? She stepped closer. I've seen you, Lucien, the real you. The man who plays piano keys he's too afraid to press. The man who keeps his grandmother's house exactly the way she left it. The man who's been working himself to death trying to protect an empire he never asked for. You don't know anything about me. I know you haven't slept in 3 days. I know you drink your coffee with 2 sugars, even though you tell everyone you take it black because you think caring about small pleasures is weakness. I know you read the same financial report 4 times this morning because you couldn't focus. And I know the reason you couldn't focus is because you spent the entire morning watching my desk through your office window. Lucien's jaw clenched. That doesn't make me good. It makes me distracted. It makes you human. Humans don't survive in my world. Then maybe your world is the problem. For a long moment, they stood there in the middle of his dead grandmother's living room while rain hammered against the windows, and somewhere in the distance, sirens wailed through Brooklyn's dark streets. Then Lucien's phone rang. He answered without looking away from Serena. What? A pause. His expression went deadly. When? Another pause. I'm on my way. He hung up. When he spoke, his voice was ice. They found the accountant who accessed the offshore account. He's being held at one of my warehouses in Red Hook. Alive? For now. Lucien grabbed his jacket. Stay here. Don't open the door for anyone. Don't answer the phone. Don't turn on lights in the front rooms. I'm coming with you. Absolutely not. You said I don't go anywhere without protection. This isn't protection. This is an interrogation. It's going to be ugly. I don't care. Serena. He turned back, his face carved from granite. I'm going to hurt someone tonight, badly. I'm going to make them tell me things they don't want to say, and I'm going to use methods you don't want to see. If you come with me, you can't unsee it. You can't pretend I'm anything other than what I am. Serena's pulse hammered in her throat. She thought about her father's gentle hands, her mother's soft voice, the life she'd left behind when she signed Lucien's confidentiality agreement. I know what you are, she said steadily. I'm coming anyway. Something flickered across Lucien's face. Surprise, maybe? Or the beginning of respect. He studied her for 3 long seconds. Then he nodded. Don't say I didn't warn you. Pashit. The warehouse was a hollow shell of corrugated metal and broken windows. Marco's team had set up floodlights in the center of the space, throwing harsh white light across oil-stained concrete. A man sat tied to a metal chair, his face already swelling from recent violence. Serena recognized him. David Chen, one of the junior accountants from Moretti Dominion's finance department. She'd seen him in the break room, making coffee, always polite, always quiet. Now he was bleeding from his nose and crying. Lucien walked across the warehouse floor with measured steps. His footsteps echoed. Nobody spoke. He stopped in front of David Chen and stood there, utterly still, for 10 long seconds. Then he pulled a gun from his shoulder holster and placed it on a metal table to his right. The sound of steel on steel reverberated through the warehouse. You accessed the offshore account, Lucien said quietly. Tell me who ordered you to do it. David's voice shook. I don't know what you're talking about. Lucien backhanded him across the face. The crack echoed like a gunshot. David's head snapped sideways. Blood sprayed from his split lip. Serena flinched. Marco, standing beside her near the entrance, didn't move. "Let's try again," Lucien said in the same quiet voice. "You transferred $2 million from my shared account with the DeLuca family to a Cayman holding company registered under a shell corporation. The digital signature was mine. The authorization came from my office computer, but I didn't make that transfer. You did. Using credentials someone gave you. Please, who gave you the credentials, David? I can't. They'll kill me. I'm going to kill you if you don't start talking." Lucien picked up the gun, chambered a round. "The only question is whether it happens fast or slow." David sobbed. Elena Constantine, she approached me 6 months ago, said she needed information, said she'd pay. How much? 200,000, wired to an account in Singapore. My daughter, she has leukemia. The treatments. I don't care about your daughter. Lucien's voice was flat, merciless. What information did you give her? Account numbers, login credentials, security protocols. She said it was just insurance. She said she'd never use it. But she did use it. I didn't know she was going to frame anyone. I swear, she just said it was leverage. Lucien shot him. The bullet tore through David Chen's shoulder. The man screamed, a raw, animal sound of agony. Blood bloomed across his shirt, spreading fast. Serena's vision tunneled. She grabbed the doorframe to keep from falling. That's for lying, Lucien said calmly. Elena Constantine doesn't need insurance. She needs a war. She wanted the Morettis and DeLucas destroying each other so the Constantines could pick up the pieces. You helped her start that war. Now tell me everything or the next bullet goes through your knee. David was hyperventilating, his face gray with shock and pain. She has files on everyone. Your whole organization. She's been building them for years. What kind of files? Financial records, offshore accounts, illegal transactions, enough to bring down your entire family if she gives them to the feds. Lucien's expression didn't change, but Serena saw his hand tighten on the gun. Where are the files? I don't know, I swear, she never told me. Guess? Maybe her estate. She has a house in the Hamptons. Security like Fort Knox. Lucien turned to one of his men. Get him to a hospital. Make sure he lives long enough to testify if I need him. Then he walked toward the exit without another word. Serena followed on numb legs. Behind them, David Chen's screams turned into broken sobbing. Outside, rain had turned to downpour. Lucien stood beside the SUV, letting water stream down his face. His shirt was spattered with blood, David's blood. Serena stopped 3 feet away, her whole body was shaking. You shot him, she said. Yes. He told you what you wanted to know. After he lied twice, the shoulder wound was incentive for future honesty. His daughter has cancer. That's unfortunate. It's also not my problem. Serena stared at him through the rain. This was the man who'd defended her against Vittorio De Luca. The man who'd called her mine like it meant something. The man who couldn't press piano keys because they reminded him of his grandmother. And he'd just shot someone without hesitation. This is what you are, Serena said slowly. This is what you meant. Yes. Lucien turned to face her. Rain plastered his dark hair to his skull, ran down his face like tears he'd never cry. Still think I'm human? Serena's throat burned. She thought about walking away right now, getting on a train, going home, forgetting she'd ever met Lucien Moretti. But she couldn't forget the way he'd stood in front of her when 12 guns pointed in their direction. Couldn't forget him saying, I made you mine. Couldn't forget the exhaustion in his eyes or the tenderness buried so deep he probably didn't remember it existed. Yes, she whispered. I think you're human. I think you're a human who's been taught that caring about people gets them killed. So you built walls so high you can't see over them anymore. I think you shot David Chen because it was easier than admitting you're terrified Elena Constantine is going to use me to destroy everything you've built. And I think you're standing in the rain right now because you want me to run so you don't have to be the one who sends me away. Lucien's facade cracked, just for a second, just enough for Serena to see the raw anguish underneath. I can't protect you from this, he said hoarsely. Elena's been planning this for years. She's got leverage I didn't know existed. She's turned my own people against me. And now she's framed you to make sure I can't think clearly enough to fight back. Every move I make puts you in more danger. Every second you stand next to me is another second closer to getting you killed. Then teach me to survive it. You can't learn this world, Serena. You're either born into it or you run from it. I'm not running. Why not? The question hung between them, loaded with everything they weren't saying. Serena stepped closer. Rain soaked through her clothes, turned her hair into dark ropes against her neck. She looked up at Lucien Moretti, Mafia King, killer, the most dangerous man she'd ever met, and told him the truth. Because I see who you are when you think nobody's watching. The man who checks my desk 17 times a day to make sure I'm still there. The man who tripled my health insurance without telling me because he knew my father's treatments were getting expensive. The man who sits in his grandmother's house running his fingers over piano keys he's too broken to play. You can shoot people and threaten councilmen and run a criminal empire, but you're still the person who cares so much it's killing you, and I'm not running from that. Lucien stared at her like she'd just spoken a language he'd forgotten existed. Then he pulled her into his arms. The kiss was brutal, all teeth and desperation, and years of denying himself anything soft. Serena kissed him back with the same ferocity, her hands fisting in his soaked shirt, rain and blood and fear mixing into something that tasted like surrender. When they finally broke apart, both of them were breathing hard. "This is a mistake," Lucien said against her mouth. "I know. Helena will use it against us. Let her try." "Serena," she kissed him again, softer this time. "Shut up and take me back to your grandmother's house." The brownstone was dark and silent when they returned. Lucien locked every door, checked every window, then stood in the living room, dripping rainwater onto the hardwood floors. Serena grabbed towels from the bathroom upstairs, brought them down. They dried off in silence, the air between them crackling with unspoken tension. "I need to make calls," Lucien said finally. "Figure out our next move. Elena has files that could destroy you." "Yes." "So we get them first." Lucien's mouth quirked, almost a smile. "Breaking into Elena Constantine's estate isn't exactly a simple task. You have 48 hours before DeLuca expects his money. We don't have time for simple." He studied her for a long moment. Then he pulled out his phone, made a call. "I need schematics for the Constantine estate in Southampton. Security systems, guard rotations, everything." A pause. "I don't care if it's illegal. I need it by morning." He hung up, looked at Serena. "You should sleep." "So should you." "I'll sleep when this is over." Serena walked across the living room, took the phone from his hand, set it on the piano. Then she took his face between her palms and forced him to look at her. "Lucien, if you collapse from exhaustion, we both die. Sleep. 4 hours. I'll wake you if anything happens." His jaw clenched, but after a moment he nodded. They went upstairs together. The bedroom Lucien indicated was small. A double bed with a faded quilt, wallpaper showing tiny roses, a window overlooking the street. "I'll be across the hall," Lucien said. But he didn't move. He stood in the doorway, looking at Serena like he was memorizing her face. "What?" she asked softly. "I'm trying to remember the last time someone told me to sleep because they were worried about me." "When did you last sleep because you wanted to, not because your body forced you?" Lucien's expression turned distant. "I don't remember." Serena's chest ached. She crossed to him, took his hand. "Stay." "Serena, not for sex. Not for anything except not being alone for a few hours. Please." He looked at their joined hands. Then slowly, he nodded. They lay down on top of the quilt, still fully dressed, not touching except for their hands. Outside, rain continued its assault on Brooklyn. Inside, Serena listened to Lucien's breathing slowly even out. "My grandmother used to say," he murmured into the darkness, "that the worst thing about this life isn't the violence. It's forgetting what it feels like to be safe." "Do you feel safe now?" A long pause. "No, but I feel less alone." Serena squeezed his hand. "That's a start." She felt rather than saw him turn toward her. His free hand came up, traced the line of her jaw with devastating gentleness. "If I get you killed," Lucien whispered, "I'll never forgive myself." "Then don't get me killed." "I'm going to try very hard not to." He kissed her, slow this time, thorough, like he had all the time in the world instead of 48 hours to prevent a war. Serena kissed him back, pouring everything she couldn't say into the press of her mouth against his. When they finally broke apart, Lucien pulled her against his chest and held her like she was the only thing keeping him anchored to earth. They fell asleep like that. Two people who'd known each other for 2 weeks, wrapped around each other in a dead woman's bedroom while a criminal empire burned down around them. Serena woke to sunlight streaming through the window and the smell of coffee. She was alone in bed. Lucien's side was cold. She found him downstairs in the kitchen, surrounded by papers and laptop screens. He'd showered and changed into fresh clothes, black shirt, dark pants, looking like he'd slept 8 hours instead of 3. "Morning," he said without looking up. "How long have you been awake?" 2 hours. The schematics came through. I've been studying them. Serena poured herself coffee, looked over his shoulder. The screen showed detailed architectural drawings, a sprawling estate with at least 20 rooms surrounded by walls, cameras, pressure sensors. "That's a fortress," she said. "Elena doesn't take chances." Lucien zoomed in on the security system. 12 guards on rotation, dogs patrolling the perimeter, motion sensors covering every approach. Breaking in would require a military team. Or an invitation. He glanced up. "What? Elena Constantine runs in society circles, right? Charity galas, museum benefits, that kind of thing?" "She hosts them, constantly." Serena pulled out her phone, started searching. It took her 3 minutes to find what she needed. "Tonight," she said, showing Lucien the screen. "Metropolitan Museum fundraiser. Elena's one of the co-chairs. The guest list is public. We get invited, we get inside her world, we get close enough to figure out where she keeps the files." Lucien stared at the phone. "That's insane. You have a better idea? Breaking in is safer than walking up to her at a party and asking about her blackmail material. We're not going to ask. We're going to observe, learn, find weaknesses." Serena met his eyes. "You said it yourself. Elena's been planning this for years. She's careful, paranoid, but she's also arrogant. She won't expect you to show up at her fundraiser with a date 48 hours before her trap is supposed to close. The audacity alone might make her careless." Lucien was quiet for a long moment, working through scenarios. Finally, he nodded. "I'll call my tailor. We need formal wear." "I don't have anything appropriate." "You will in 3 hours." He was already dialing. "Marco will take you shopping. Buy whatever you need. Charge it to my account." "Lucien," he covered the phone. "If we're doing this, we're doing it right. Elena respects power. We need to look like we own the city." 4 hours later, Serena stood in front of a full-length mirror in a boutique that didn't have price tags because if you had to ask, you couldn't afford it. The dress was midnight blue silk, cut to follow her curves like water, with a neckline that suggested danger without crossing into inappropriate. The saleswoman circled her like a hawk. "Perfect, you look devastating." Serena caught sight of the price tag that had fallen on the floor. Her stomach dropped. "This costs $8,000. Mr. Moretti approved the budget. He said, and I quote, 'Make her look like she could ruin me.'" Serena's reflection stared back at her, a woman she barely recognized, polished, dangerous, the kind of woman who belonged at Lucien Moretti's side. She bought the dress. The Metropolitan Museum glittered like a jewel box. Serena stepped out of the limousine. Lucien had insisted on a car, said arriving in an SUV sent the wrong message, and immediately understood why people spent fortunes on single evenings. Everyone here wore wealth like armor, diamond necklaces, tailored tuxedos, designer gowns that probably cost more than cars. Photographers lined the entrance, flashbulbs exploding as guests posed and smiled and pretended they weren't all predators circling the same prey. Lucien appeared beside her, devastating in a black tuxedo that made him look like he'd stepped out of a vintage film. He offered his arm. "Ready?" he murmured. "No. Good. Fear keeps you sharp." He guided her toward the entrance. "Remember, we're here to observe. Don't engage Elena directly. Don't react if she provokes you. And whatever you do, don't let her separate us." They walked through golden doors into a hall filled with classical statues and Renaissance paintings. Champagne flowed. String quartets played. Beautiful people clustered in groups, discussing art and politics and things Serena suspected were code for darker conversations. Lucien Moretti. The voice cut through the noise like a blade. Serena turned. Elena Constantine stood 10 feet away, resplendent in a silver gown that probably cost more than Serena's car. Her silver hair was swept into an elegant knot. Her smile was a weapon. "I didn't expect to see you here," Elena said warmly. Too warmly. Especially not with such charming company. She looked directly at Serena. The assessment was instant, brutal, and deeply unsettling. "Miss Vale, isn't it?" Lucien's new assistant. "Executive assistant," Serena corrected. Her voice came out steadier than she felt. "Of course." Elena's smile widened. "How are you enjoying the position?" "It's challenging." "I imagine it is. Lucien can be quite demanding." The innuendo hung in the air. Lucien's hand tightened fractionally on Serena's back. "Elena," he said coolly, "beautiful event." "Thank you. I do try." She gestured toward the galleries. "Have you seen the new Caravaggio acquisition? Judith beheading Holofernes. Quite violent for such a refined setting, but then violence can be beautiful when executed properly." The double meaning wasn't subtle. Serena felt Lucien tense. "We'll be sure to view it," he said. "Please do. And afterward, perhaps we could discuss recent financial discrepancies. I understand Vittorio is quite upset about missing funds. Such a troublesome situation." "I'm handling it." "Are you?" Elena's gaze flicked to Serena. "Or are you distracted?" Before Lucien could respond, a waiter appeared with champagne. Elena took a glass, raised it slightly. "To new beginnings," she said, "and inevitable endings." She drifted away into the crowd, leaving a wake of expensive perfume and unspoken threats. Serena exhaled slowly. "She knows." "Of course she knows. She orchestrated the whole thing." Lucien steered them toward a quieter corner. "But she's playing games. That means she doesn't think we're a real threat. Should we be flattered or insulted? Cautious." He handed her champagne. "Drink slowly. Stay alert." They circulated through the galleries, pretending to admire art while actually studying the room. Serena noticed patterns, the way certain people gravitated toward Elena, the quiet conversations in corners, the exchange of business cards that probably weren't really business cards. "She's recruiting," Serena murmured. "Right here, in public, using the fundraiser as cover. She's been doing it for years." Lucien's voice was grim. "Half the people in this room probably owe her favors. The other half want to. How do we fight that?" "We don't. We find the files. We destroy her leverage. We take away her power." They moved deeper into the museum. In a gallery featuring Baroque sculptures, Serena noticed something. A woman in a black dress, standing too close to a doorway marked "Private, Staff Only." Not a guest. A guard. "Lucien," Serena breathed. 3:00. He followed her gaze. His eyes narrowed. "Elena's security. She brought her own people. Which means there's something in this museum she wants protected. Or someone." They watched the guard for 5 minutes. She didn't move, didn't check her phone, just stood there, a human barrier. "I need to get past her," Lucien said quietly. "How?" "Distraction. You go back to the main hall, find Elena, keep her occupied." "Absolutely not. You said don't let her separate us. I'll have Marco shadowing me. You'll be safer in a crowd with her than in a restricted area with her guards." Serena wanted to argue, but Lucien was already texting Marco, coordinating. 5 minutes, he said. "Then get out of the conversation and find me." He kissed her forehead, quick, possessive, then disappeared into the crowd. Serena took a deep breath and went to find Elena Constantine. She located her in the main hall, holding court with a circle of admirers. Serena approached with forced confidence. "Mrs. Constantine," she said, "I was hoping we could speak." Elena's eyebrows rose. "How forward. I like that." She dismissed the others with a wave. "Walk with me, Miss Vale." They moved through galleries at a leisurely pace. Elena pointed out paintings, discussed provenance and auction prices, and the failings of various art critics. Serena made appropriate noises while her mind raced. 4 minutes. You're very beautiful, Elena said suddenly, but I suspect you know that. Thank you. It's not a compliment. Beauty is currency in our world. Lucien clearly finds you valuable. I'm trying to determine why. Serena met her eyes. Maybe because I'm good at my job. Elena laughed, crystalline and cold. Darling, Lucien has had dozens of assistants, all competent. None lasted more than 6 months. You've been here 2 weeks and he's already bringing you to events where wives would be more appropriate. That's not about job performance. What is it about? Weakness. Elena stopped in front of a painting showing a woman stabbing a man through the throat. Judith and Holofernes, just as she'd mentioned earlier. Lucien's father taught him never to care about anything someone could use against him. For 20 years, he followed that rule perfectly. Then you walked in wearing red lipstick, and he forgot everything he'd learned. Serena's pulse hammered. You're overestimating my importance. Am I? Then explain why he defended you to Vittorio De Luca at gunpoint. Explain why he's been making desperate phone calls all night trying to find $2 million he never stole. Explain why he's here right now, at my fundraiser, pretending to admire art while actually plotting how to destroy me. 5 minutes. Serena forced herself to stay calm. If you know all that, why are you telling me? Because I want you to understand something very clearly. Elena leaned closer. Her voice dropped to a whisper. I've been building leverage against the Moretti family for 7 years. I have evidence of money laundering, tax evasion, contract killings, and enough RICO violations to put Lucien's entire organization in federal prison for the rest of their natural lives. I've embedded my people in his company. I've turned his accountants. I've made myself indispensable to his enemies. And I did all of it while he was too arrogant to notice. Why? Because the Morettis killed my husband 15 years ago, made it look like a business dispute. Lucien was barely 17, but his father gave the order. I've waited every single day since then to watch their empire burn. Serena's blood went cold. This wasn't just business. This was revenge. So where do I fit in your plan? She asked quietly. You're the match. Elena smiled. The spark that makes Lucien forget to be careful. When I'm finished, he'll watch everyone he loves destroyed because he couldn't resist one pretty girl in a borrowed dress. Before Serena could respond, shouting erupted from somewhere deeper in the museum. Gunshots. 3 of them, sharp and unmistakable. Elena's smile vanished. She grabbed a security guard, snapped orders in Italian. Serena ran. She pushed through panicking guests, following the sound. Marco appeared from nowhere, grabbed her arm. Get out, he barked. Now. Where's Lucien? Going where you can't follow. Move. He dragged her toward the exit. Behind them, more shouting. Museum alarms started blaring. Guests stampeded for the doors. Serena twisted free from Marco's grip. I'm not leaving without him. He ordered me. I don't care what he ordered. She ran back into the museum, Marco cursing behind her. They found Lucien in a service corridor, pressed against the wall, bleeding from his left arm. His gun was drawn. What happened? Serena gasped. Elena's guard tried to stop me. Lucien's face was white. I got past her. Found the office she was protecting. There's a safe. Digital. I don't have the code. Can you crack it? Not in the time we have. Security's coming. We need to leave. Police sirens wailed outside, getting closer. Serena looked at Lucien's bleeding arm, at Marco's grim expression, at the corridor filling with smoke from somewhere. They'd failed. Elena had won. Then Serena remembered something David Chen had said. She has files. Security, like Fort Knox. The Hamptons, she said suddenly. Elena keeps the real files at her estate. This office is probably just surveillance equipment, monitoring systems. Lucien stared at her. You're sure? No, but I'm right. He made a decision in half a second. Marco, get us out. Now. They ran through service exits, emerged into an alley. The limousine was gone, probably impounded by police. Marco had an SUV waiting 2 blocks away. They drove through Manhattan with sirens screaming behind them. Lucien tied a tourniquet around his arm using his belt, his face carved from ice. Elena knows we were there, he said. She'll move the files, maybe destroy them. Or she'll wait, Serena countered. She wants to watch you burn. She won't destroy evidence until after she's used it. You're betting our lives on amateur psychology. You're bleeding from a gunshot wound because you trusted my instincts about her office. Trust me now." Lucien looked at her for a long moment. Then he pulled out his phone. "How fast can you get to team to Southampton?" he asked whoever answered. A pause. "Good. Full tactical gear. We're hitting the Constantine estate before sunrise." He hung up, met Serena's eyes. "If you're wrong," he said quietly, "we die." "If I'm wrong," Serena whispered back, "we were already dead." They drove through the night. Lucien made calls, coordinating his team, pulling favors, assembling resources. Serena watched Manhattan's lights fade into darkness and wondered if she'd ever see the city again. At 3 a.m., they arrived at a warehouse 20 miles from Elena's estate. Lucien's tactical team was waiting, 8 men in black combat gear, faces hard as granite. "Sir." The team leader, a man Marco called Ghost, nodded to Lucien. "We have thermal imaging of the property. 12 guards visible, probably more inside. Dogs are kenneled. Security system is state-of-the-art, but we've got bypass protocols." "Time frame?" 30 minutes to breach. 20 to get in and out if we move fast. Lucien turned to Serena. "You're staying here." "Like hell." "Serena, she's expecting you. She knows you'll come, but she won't expect me." Serena stepped closer. "I can get into places your men can't. Servants' quarters, staff areas, places Elena thinks are beneath notice. That's where she'd hide something truly valuable." Ghost frowned. "She's a civilian." "She's right," Lucien interrupted, his jaw clenched. "Elena underestimates women. Always has. She'll have security focused on male intruders. That doesn't mean bringing an untrained civilian into a combat situation. I'm trained enough to follow orders and stay quiet," Serena said firmly. "And I'm going. Argue or accept it, but we're wasting time." Lucien stared at her like he was memorizing her face again. Then he nodded. "Gear her up." They gave Serena a black tactical vest, earpiece, flashlight, showed her how to use the radio. Ghost ran through basic hand signals. "Stay behind me at all times," Lucien said. "If shooting starts, get flat and don't move until I come get you. Understand?" "Yes." He pulled her close, kissed her hard. "Don't make me regret this." "Don't get killed." They moved out at 3:47 a.m. The Constantine estate loomed against the pre-dawn sky. A massive colonial structure surrounded by walls and gates and the kind of security money could buy. Ghost's team bypassed the cameras with equipment Serena didn't understand. They went over the wall using grappling hooks. Serena followed Lucien through manicured gardens that smelled like roses and old money. Ahead, the main house glowed with interior lighting. Guards patrolled in predictable patterns. Too predictable. "It's a trap," Serena whispered into her radio. "Copy," Ghost responded. "Advise we abort." Gunfire erupted from the house. Not toward them, from inside. "Move!" Lucien shouted. They sprinted toward the house as windows exploded and muzzle flashes lit up the darkness. Someone was fighting inside Elena's estate. Someone who wasn't part of their team. They crashed through a side door. The interior was chaos. Overturned furniture, broken glass, bodies, DeLuca's men. Serena recognized the tattoos, the style of weapons. Vittorio DeLuca had sent his own team to raid Elena's estate. The two forces were tearing each other apart in Elena's foyer. "Upstairs," Lucien barked, "while they're distracted." They ran up a marble staircase while gunfights raged below. The second floor was quieter. Serena checked rooms while Lucien covered her. Bedrooms, bathrooms, a library filled with leather-bound books. Then she found it. A study. Dark wood paneling, massive desk, and behind a painting of a pastoral scene, a wall safe. "Lucien." He was beside her instantly, examined the safe. Digital lock, 8-digit code. "Can you crack it?" Given time, an explosion rocked the house. Plaster rained from the ceiling. "We don't have time," Serena said. Lucien stared at the safe. His face was grim. "Then we take the whole thing." "What?" He pulled plastic explosives from his vest. Clear the room. They blew the safe off the wall. The explosion was deafening, sent paintings crashing to the floor. Alarms shrieked, but when the smoke cleared, the safe sat on the floor, dented but intact. Lucien grabbed it. Move! They ran back toward the stairs. Below, the gunfight had intensified. Bodies littered the foyer, DeLuca's men, Elena's guards. Impossible to tell who was winning. Ghost's voice crackled over the radio. "Sir, we're pinned down." A figure appeared at the top of the stairs. Elena Constantine, holding a gun. She looked at Lucien, at Serena, at the safe in Lucien's arms, her face twisted with rage. "You're too late," she said. "The files are already with federal prosecutors. I sent them 20 minutes ago. Your empire dies at dawn." Lucien's expression didn't change. "Then you just made yourself expendable." Elena's gun came up. Serena moved without thinking, threw herself at Elena as the gun fired. The bullet went wide. Both women hit the floor in a tangle of limbs. The gun skittered away. Elena was stronger than she looked. Her nails raked across Serena's face. Serena grabbed a shard of broken vase from the floor, swung it. The shard cut deep into Elena's arm. She screamed. Lucien hauled Serena to her feet. "We're leaving. Now." They ran down the stairs, through the carnage, out into pre-dawn darkness. Behind them, sirens approached. Police, fire trucks. The sound of authority descending on a war zone. They made it to the SUV. Marco was already driving before the doors closed. "Hospital," Lucien ordered. "She's bleeding." Serena looked down. Blood soaked through her vest. She couldn't tell how much was hers, how much was Elena's. Her vision started to blur. "Stay with me," Lucien said roughly, pressing his jacket against her side. "Serena, look at me. Stay with me." She tried to answer, but darkness pulled her under like a riptide. The last thing she heard was Lucien's voice, stripped of all control, raw with something that sounded like terror. "Don't you dare die. I just found you. Don't you dare." Then nothing. Pain dragged Serena back to consciousness like fishhooks through her skin. She gasped, tried to move, felt restraints holding her down. "Easy," Lucien's voice rough from exhaustion. "You're in a private clinic. You've been out for 6 hours." Serena's eyes focused slowly. White ceiling, medical equipment beeping. Lucien sat in a chair beside the bed, his left arm professionally bandaged, his face gaunt with sleeplessness. What happened? Her throat felt like sandpaper. "Elena's shard cut deeper than we thought. You lost a lot of blood. The doctor stitched you up." Lucien's hand found hers, gripped tight enough to hurt. "You could have died." "So could you." Serena tried to sit up. The room spun. Elena said she sent the files to federal prosecutors. Lucien's expression went dark. "She wasn't bluffing. FBI raided 3 of my properties at dawn, froze 17 offshore accounts, issued warrants for 12 people in my organization." "Including you?" "Not yet, but it's coming." He stood, paced to the window. Outside, rain hammered against glass. Everything my family built over 3 generations, gone in one night because I was too distracted to see Elena coming. Serena heard the self-loathing in his voice. "This isn't your fault." "Isn't it? I brought you into this world. I made you a target. I convinced myself I could protect you while fighting a war on 3 fronts. And now you're lying in a hospital bed with 19 stitches because I failed at both." "Lucien." Elena was right. He turned from the window. His gray eyes were hollow. "My father taught me never to care about anything someone could use against me. I forgot that rule. And it's destroying everything." The words hit like a slap. Serena forced herself upright, ignoring the pain screaming through her side. "Don't you dare," she said, her voice shaking with fury. "Don't you dare stand there and tell me caring about me was a mistake. I chose this. I chose you. I walked into that estate knowing exactly what could happen. You don't get to erase that choice just because you're scared." "I'm not scared. I'm realistic. Elena's files are with the FBI. DeLuca wants $2 million I don't have by tomorrow. And the Constantines now have every reason to finish what they started. The only way to protect you is to remove you from the equation." Understanding crashed over Serena like ice water. "You're sending me away." "I'm getting you somewhere safe, somewhere Elena and Vittorio can't reach you." "Where?" "Witness protection." New identity, new city. Marco's already coordinating with contacts who specialize in disappearances. No. Serena ripped the IV from her arm. Blood welled. Absolutely not. This isn't negotiable. The hell it isn't. You think putting me in some safe house in Nebraska makes me invisible? Elena spent 7 years planning this. You think she doesn't have people everywhere? You think changing my name erases the fact that I matter to you? Lucien's jaw clenched. Then what do you suggest? We fight back. We find leverage of our own. The door burst open. Marco stumbled in, bleeding from a head wound, his face sheet white. Sir, we have a problem. Lucien was across the room instantly. What happened? Your father, Marco's voice cracked. They took him 20 minutes ago. DeLuca's men hit the estate in Westchester. 8 guards dead. They left a message. He handed Lucien a phone. On the screen, a video played. Grainy footage of an older man tied to a chair in a concrete room. Alessandro Moretti, Lucien's father, looked exactly like an aged version of his son. Same gray eyes, same aristocratic features, same rigid control even with a gun pressed against his temple. Vittorio De Luca's voice came from off-screen. Lucien, you have until midnight, $2 million or your father dies on camera for the whole city to watch. Don't test me. The video ended. Lucien stared at the phone. His face had gone completely blank, the kind of emptiness that came before hurricanes. Get everyone to the warehouse, he said quietly. Too quietly. Full roster. I want every man we have armed and ready in 30 minutes. Sir, if we mobilize that aggressively, the feds will... I don't care what the feds do. Vittorio just declared war. I'm going to finish it. Marco left. Serena grabbed Lucien's arm. Don't do this. It's what he wants. You attack him. You confirm Elena's narrative that you're a violent criminal. The FBI will have everything they need. They already have everything they need. At this point, saving my father is more important than saving my reputation. Your father wouldn't want you to sacrifice your empire. You don't know him. Lucien pulled away. My father built this empire from nothing. He survived wars, betrayals, federal investigations that should have buried us. He taught me everything I know about power. And now he's sitting in a concrete room waiting for me to prove I'm worthy of the name Moretti. I'm not abandoning him. Serena heard the desperation beneath the words. This wasn't about strategy. This was about a son trying to save his father. Then let me help. You can barely stand. I can think. I can plan. I can do something other than hide in a safe house while you walk into a slaughter. She grabbed his jacket. Lucien, please, don't shut me out now. He stared at her for a long moment. Then his shoulders sagged fractionally. The warehouse. 1 hour. Marco will bring you. He left without looking back. The warehouse was chaos. 40 men in tactical gear checking weapons, loading magazines, their faces carved from stone. Serena sat in a corner watching Lucien orchestrate war with cold precision. DeLuca's compound is in Red Hook, old shipping facility, reinforced walls, probably 30 guards minimum. Lucien pointed to blueprints spread across a table. We go in hard and fast, 2 teams, one breaches the front, draws their fire. Second team hits from the water side, extracts my father. Ghost frowned. Sir, that's a suicide run. DeLuca will be expecting exactly this response. Then we give him what he expects and hit harder than he's prepared for. The casualties are acceptable if my father lives. Lucien's voice was ice. Anyone not willing to die tonight can leave now. Nobody moved. Serena stood. Every eye in the warehouse turned to her. This is a trap, she said clearly. DeLuca doesn't want money. He wants you dead. He's betting you'll choose your father over strategy. Elena probably coordinated this whole thing. One of Lucien's men, a scarred veteran named Carlo, spat on the floor. The girl's right. This stinks like a setup. Of course it's a setup, Lucien said. But I don't have a choice. If I don't go, Alessandro dies. If I do go, I might die. I'm choosing the option where my father lives. There's a third option, Serena said. Lucien's eyes narrowed. Which is? Give them what they want, but not what they expect. She walked to the table, studied the blueprints. Her mind raced through scenarios, possibilities, the kind of lateral thinking that had kept her alive in Lucien's world for 3 weeks. DeLuca wants money, she said slowly. $2 million. But he also wants to humiliate you. Kill your father on camera. Prove the Morettis are weak. What if we give him the money? I don't have $2 million liquid. I know, but he doesn't know that. We tell him we're ready to pay. We arrange a meeting, neutral ground, public enough that he can't just execute everyone. And while you're negotiating, your team extracts Alessandro from wherever they're actually holding him. Ghost shook his head. We don't know where Alessandro is. That video could have been filmed anywhere. Serena turned to Marco. The head wound you came in with, where did the attack happen? Westchester Estate, North Wing. Which direction did they take Alessandro? East, toward the coast. How many vehicles? 3. Black SUVs. Serena pulled out her phone, started searching. DeLuca owns property in Connecticut. I saw the deeds while I was filing contracts. A marina, 30 miles from Westchester. If they went east toward the coast, they probably took him there. Lucien stared at her. That's a massive assumption. It's better than a frontal assault on a fortress. Serena met his eyes. Lucien, I know you want to tear DeLuca apart with your bare hands, but that's what he's counting on. Be smarter than he expects. The warehouse went silent. 40 men waited for Lucien's decision. He looked at the blueprints, at his men, at Serena. Carlo, take a team to the Connecticut Marina. Recon only. Confirm Alessandro's location. Ghost, you're with me. We're meeting DeLuca. He checked his watch. We have 6 hours. Move. The warehouse exploded into motion. Serena sagged against the table, adrenaline draining away, leaving exhaustion and pain. Lucien crossed to her. You should rest. I'm coming with you. Absolutely not. DeLuca knows I'm your weakness. If you show up without me, he'll know something's wrong. I need to be there. Serena, we don't have time to argue. Just say yes. Lucien's jaw clenched, but he nodded. They met Vittorio DeLuca at a restaurant on the waterfront. Neutral territory, expensive enough to have private rooms, public enough that mass murder would draw immediate attention. Lucien brought Ghost and 2 other guards. DeLuca arrived with 4 men who looked like they'd killed people for less than sport. Serena sat beside Lucien, her side screaming where the stitches pulled. She kept her face blank. DeLuca looked older in person than in photos, 50-something, with silver hair and the kind of tan that came from yachts and private beaches. He smiled warmly when they entered. Lucien, thank you for being reasonable. Lucien sat without shaking hands. Where's my father? Safe. For now. DeLuca's eyes slid to Serena. And you brought your little assistant. How touching. We're here to negotiate, Lucien said flatly. Not socialize. Of course, $2 million. I believe that was the agreed-upon amount. Lucien slid a briefcase across the table. Bearer bonds. Untraceable. $2.3 million. DeLuca opened the briefcase, examined the contents. His expression didn't change. These are very good forgeries, he said quietly. Almost perfect, but still forgeries. The temperature in the room dropped 20 degrees. Lucien's hand moved toward his jacket. Ghost and the other guards drew weapons. DeLuca's men responded instantly. 6 guns pointed across a table laden with expensive silverware. You're bluffing, Lucien said. Am I? DeLuca pulled out his phone, showed them a document. I had my finance people examine these bonds the moment you walked in. Tracking numbers don't match federal records. Watermarks are wrong. You tried to buy your father's life with counterfeit paper. Serena's blood turned to ice. She looked at Lucien. His face was stone, but she saw the calculation behind his eyes. He'd known. He'd known the bonds were fake and brought them anyway. This was the real plan. Stall DeLuca while Carlo's team found Alessandro. But DeLuca wasn't stupid. Here's what's going to happen, Vittorio said pleasantly. You're going to sit here while I make a phone call, and then we're all going to watch your father die, together, as a family. He dialed. The phone rang on speaker. Someone answered. Sir? Kill him. Wait, Serena heard herself shout. We have real money. In the Cayman accounts. We just need time to transfer. DeLuca laughed. Darling, those accounts were frozen this morning. FBI got to them before you could. You're broke, desperate, and out of options. This meeting was never about negotiation. It was about making Lucien watch his father die, knowing he failed. The phone on speaker crackled. Then a voice Serena recognized. Carlo, Lucien's man. Sir, we've secured the package. Alessandro Moretti is safe. Repeat, package secured. DeLuca's smile vanished. Lucien's expression didn't change, but Serena saw triumph flash in his gray eyes. It appears, Lucien said softly, that we've both been playing games. DeLuca's hand moved toward his weapon, but Ghost was faster, gun pressed against Vittorio's temple before his fingers touched the grip. Don't, Ghost said calmly. DeLuca's men tensed. Lucien's guards aimed at their heads. The entire room balanced on the edge of a massacre. Then Serena heard something that made her stomach drop. Police sirens. Multiple vehicles. Coming fast. Lucien heard them too, his jaw clenched. FBI. Anonymous tip, DeLuca said, still smiling even with a gun against his skull. Called in 20 minutes ago. Reporting a meeting between known mafia figures at this location. They'll be here in 60 seconds. And unlike me, they'll actually arrest you. Lucien stood. Move. Now. They ran for the back exit. Behind them, DeLuca's laughter echoed through the restaurant. They burst into an alley as federal vehicles screeched to a stop out front. Ghost had an SUV waiting 2 blocks away. They ran through rain-soaked streets, Serena's stitches tearing with every step. They made it to the vehicle. Marco was driving, Alessandro Moretti in the back seat looking bruised but alive. Dad? Lucien's voice cracked on the word. Alessandro's hand gripped his son's shoulder. You came. Always. The SUV tore through Brooklyn. Behind them, sirens multiplied. Helicopters appeared overhead, searchlights cutting through rain. They're tracking us, Marco said grimly. Must have tagged the vehicle. Ditch it, Lucien ordered. Switch to the backup. They abandoned the SUV in an industrial lot, transferred to a nondescript sedan. Lost the helicopters in a warren of warehouses and shipping containers. By the time they reached the safe house, not the brownstone, somewhere new, somewhere nobody knew about, dawn was breaking over New York. Inside, Alessandro collapsed into a chair. Lucien poured him whiskey with shaking hands. Serena watched father and son sitting together, recognizing the same steel in both men's spines, the same refusal to break. How bad is it? Alessandro asked. Bad. Elena Constantine gave the FBI everything. Account numbers, transaction records, witness statements. They have enough to prosecute under RICO. Witness statements from whom? Lucien's face went dark. David Chen, our own accountant. Elena turned him months ago. Then we eliminate him. He's already in federal custody. Protective detail. Unreachable. Alessandro drank his whiskey in one swallow. What else? DeLuca wants war. The Constantines are pushing everyone to choose sides. Half our allies are running scared. The other half are waiting to see if we survive the week. And the girl? Alessandro's eyes moved to Serena. Why is she still here? The question wasn't hostile, just curious. The assessment of a man who'd spent 70 years reading people. Because she's mine, Lucien said quietly, and I protect what's mine. Alessandro studied Serena for a long moment. Then he nodded. Your mother would have liked her. She had the same foolish courage. He stood, walked to Serena. Up close she could see the resemblance to Lucien. Same sharp features, same intensity, aged by decades of war. My son, Alessandro said, has never cared about anything except this empire. Never allowed himself friends. Never pursued women except for physical release. Never showed weakness. Then you appeared. And suddenly he's making mistakes, taking risks, forgetting the lessons I spent years teaching him. I didn't ask him to care, Serena said. No, but you allowed it, which makes you either very brave or very stupid. Alessandro's expression softened fractionally. For what it's worth, I think you're brave, and I think you might be the only person alive who can save him from himself. Before Serena could respond, Lucien's phone rang. He answered, listened. His face went white. When? A pause. How many dead? Another pause. I'm on my way. He hung up. When he spoke, his voice was hollow. That was Ghost. The FBI just raided our headquarters, found 3 bodies in the basement, execution style. Forensics is already on scene. Planted, Alessandro said immediately. Someone's framing us for murder. Doesn't matter. Bodies in our building equals leverage. The FBI will use it to fast-track arrests. Lucien paced like a caged wolf. We need to disappear tonight, out of the country before they issue warrants. Run? Alessandro's voice was sharp. Morettis don't run. Morettis survive. That's what you taught me. Father and son stared at each other. Serena saw the argument playing out in loaded silence. Pride versus pragmatism, honor versus survival. Then Alessandro nodded. Where? Argentina. We have contacts in Buenos Aires, property that can't be traced. We can rebuild there. And the empire here? Gone. Burned. We start over. The admission seemed to physically hurt Lucien. 3 generations of work destroyed in 1 week. Marco appeared in his doorway. Sir, we have another problem. What now? Your sister. FBI took her into custody 2 hours ago. She's being held at the federal building in Manhattan. Lucien froze. Gianna? Why? Accessory charges. Money laundering. They're using her as leverage to force you to surrender. Serena saw something crack in Lucien's armor. She's not part of this. She's a music teacher. She doesn't even know about the business. The FBI doesn't care. They want you. They'll use anyone connected to you. Alessandro stood. We can't leave her. We can't save her either. The federal building is a fortress. We'd need an army. Then we get an army, Serena said. Everyone turned to stare at her. We're out of allies, Lucien said. Everyone's abandoned us. Not everyone. Serena pulled out her phone, started scrolling through files she'd copied from Moretti Dominion servers weeks ago. You have dirt on half the powerful people in New York. Politicians, judges, police commissioners, people who owe you favors, people who've taken your money. Call in every debt, burn every bridge. Get enough pressure on the FBI that they have to release Gianna. That would expose our entire network, Alessandro said. Destroy relationships we've spent decades building. You were planning to flee the country anyway. What do you have to lose? Lucien stared at the phone in Serena's hand, at the files representing years of carefully cultivated leverage. Then he started making calls. Tintak. Over the next 6 hours, Lucien Moretti called in every favor he'd ever earned. He threatened judges with released recordings of bribes. He reminded politicians about offshore accounts opened in their names. He sent evidence of affairs to police commissioners' wives. He burned through decades of carefully maintained alliances like a man setting his own house on fire. And slowly, impossibly, pressure started building. A federal judge called the field office demanding to know why Gianna Moretti, a civilian with no criminal record, was being held without formal charges. A congressman held a press conference condemning FBI overreach. 3 separate lawyers filed motions for her immediate release. By sunset, the FBI caved. Gianna Moretti walked out of federal custody into Marco's waiting vehicle, shaken but unharmed. Lucien met her at a parking garage 3 blocks away. Serena watched brother embrace sister, saw the fierce protectiveness in the way Lucien held her. Are you okay? He asked. Gianna nodded. She was younger than Serena expected, maybe 25 with dark hair and the same gray eyes as her brother. They questioned me for hours, wanted to know about the business, about Dad, about you. I didn't tell them anything. Good girl. Lucien, what's happening? Why is the FBI? It's complicated, and we don't have time. We're leaving the country tonight, all of us. Gianna pulled back. What? I have students, concerts. My whole life is here. Your life here is over. You're coming with us. You can't just... He can, Alessandro interrupted, appearing from the shadows. Because staying means becoming collateral damage in a war you don't understand. Your brother is trying to keep you alive. Let him. Gianna looked between them. Then her gaze landed on Serena. Who's this? Complicated, Lucien said again. Serena, meet my sister. Gianna, this is Serena. She's the reason you're not still in federal custody. Gianna studied Serena with the same intensity as her brother. Thank you. You're welcome. We should move, Marco said. Private jet leaves from Teterboro in 2 hours. We need to be on it. They piled into vehicles. Serena rode with Lucien and Gianna, watching the city slide past through rain-streaked windows. I can't believe this is happening, Gianna said softly. Last week I was teaching piano to first graders. Now I'm fleeing the country. I'm sorry, Lucien said. His voice was raw. I never wanted this life to touch you. But it did anyway. Because we're family, and in our family, one person's sins become everyone's burden. The bitter truth of it hung in the air. They arrived at Teterboro Airport 90 minutes later. The private jet sat on the tarmac, fueled and ready. Marco's team had already loaded their minimal luggage. Everything they owned now fit in 6 bags. Passports, Marco said, distributing documents. New identities. You're the Romano family now, from Sicily, moving to Argentina for business opportunities. Serena took her passport. The photo was hers, but the name was wrong. Serena Romano instead of Vale. A stranger's life printed on official paper. What about my father? She asked suddenly. My family? Lucien turned. In the chaos of the last 12 hours, neither of them had mentioned her family. We'll get them out once we're settled, he said. I promise. They'll ask questions. My mother, will believe whatever story we tell her. Serena, I know this is hard, but there's no other choice. Serena looked at the passport, at the plane, at the city skyline glowing in the distance, home for 24 years, about to become a memory. 5 minutes, she said. I need 5 minutes. She walked to the edge of the tarmac, pulled out her phone. Her mother answered on the second ring. Sweetheart? It's late. Mom, I need you to listen without asking questions. Can you do that? A pause, then cautiously, what's wrong? I'm leaving, tonight. I can't tell you where or why, but I need you to know it's not because I want to. It's because staying puts you and Dad in danger. Serena, what are you talking about? The job. It's not what I thought. I got involved in things I shouldn't have, and now I need to disappear for a while, maybe a long while. Her mother's voice sharpened. Did someone hurt you? No. But someone might if I stay. Please, Mom, I need you to trust me. Take care of Dad. Don't look for me. I'll contact you when it's safe. Serena, I love you. Tell Dad I love him. I'm sorry. She hung up before her mother could respond, stood there with tears streaming down her face and the weight of abandonment crushing her chest. Lucien appeared beside her. Ready? No. Me neither. They walked toward the plane together, but before they reached the stairs, headlights flooded the tarmac. 6 vehicles, federal plates, FBI. Go! Marco shouted. Get to the plane! They ran. Behind them, agents poured from vehicles, weapons drawn, voices shouting commands through megaphones. Lucien Moretti, you're under arrest. Stop or we will fire. They reached the plane stairs. Alessandro went first, then Gianna. Serena followed. Lucien was right behind her. Then gunshots cracked through the night. Not FBI weapons. Something else. From a different direction. Serena turned and saw muzzle flashes from the terminal building. Saw one of Marco's men go down. Saw another stumble. Ambush. DeLuca, Lucien snarled. He tipped the FBI and brought his own people to finish us. More gunfire. The FBI agents hit the ground, scrambling for cover. DeLuca's men advanced from the terminal, not caring about federal presence, focused entirely on killing the Morettis. Get in the plane! Alessandro shouted from the doorway. Now! Lucien grabbed Serena's arm, hauled her up the stairs. Bullets pinged off metal. The pilot was already starting engines. Marco appeared, bleeding from his leg. Sir, we can't take off. They'll shoot us down. We're dead if we stay. The plane's door sealed. Engines roared. Through the windows, Serena watched chaos unfold. FBI and DeLuca's men in a firefight, bodies falling, vehicles exploding. The plane started moving, faster, faster. Serena felt the wheels leave the ground, gravity pulling at her stomach. Then an explosion. The plane lurched violently. Alarm screamed. The pilot fought for control. Left engines hit, he shouted. We're losing altitude. Lucien was at the cockpit instantly. Can we make it? Not to Argentina. Not even to international waters. We'll be lucky to make it 10 miles. Where's the nearest safe landing? There isn't one. We're going down. Serena gripped her seat as the plane shuddered and dropped. Through the window, she saw the New York skyline tilting at wrong angles, saw the dark expanse of water rushing up to meet them. They were going to crash. Gianna was crying. Alessandro was praying, the first time Serena had heard him mention anything spiritual. Marco was on the radio, screaming coordinates to someone. Lucien crossed to Serena, sat beside her, took her hand. "I'm sorry," he said quietly, "for all of this, for dragging you into my world, for not being strong enough to let you go. Don't apologize for the only real thing either of us has ever had." The plane dropped faster. Warning alarms turned into continuous shrieks. Lucien pulled Serena close, kissed her like it was the last thing he'd ever do. It might be. "Brace!" the pilot screamed. The water hit like concrete. Metal tore, glass shattered. The world became a chaos of screaming and impact and water flooding through broken seams. Serena felt the seatbelt cut into her chest, felt the plane breaking apart around them, felt cold water rushing over her legs, her waist, her chest, felt Lucien's hand still gripping hers. The plane sank into darkness, and everything went black. Serena woke to the sound of waves and someone crying. She was lying on sand, cold, wet. Every part of her body screamed with pain. She forced her eyes open. Dawn light painted the sky in shades of bruised purple. She was on a beach, narrow, rocky, unfamiliar. Beside her, Gianna sat with her knees drawn to her chest, sobbing. "Where?" Serena's voice came out as a croak. "Where are we?" Gianna turned. Her face was cut, bleeding from a dozen small wounds. "Rockaway Beach. We washed ashore. Marco pulled us out." "The others?" Gianna's sob broke into a wail. Serena forced herself to sit up, looked down the beach. Alessandro Moretti lay on his back 20 feet away, not moving. Marco knelt beside him, doing chest compressions, but Serena could see from the gray pallor of Alessandro's face that it was futile. "No," she whispered. "He got us out," Gianna said through tears. "When the plane went down, he got me and Marco to the emergency exit, but there wasn't enough time for him. The plane sank too fast." Serena's chest constricted. "Where's Lucien?" Gianna pointed further down the beach. Lucien sat alone at the water's edge, staring out at the ocean where pieces of wreckage still floated. His back was rigid. His shoulders shook with silent grief. Serena tried to stand. Her legs wouldn't support her. She crawled across the sand, every movement agony, until she reached him. "Lucien!" He didn't turn, didn't acknowledge her. "My father drowned saving my sister," he said, his voice completely flat. "Because I tried to run instead of fight. Because I made every wrong choice. Because I let myself care about things I should have kept at a distance. This isn't your fault, isn't it?" He finally looked at her. His gray eyes were empty. "Everyone I've ever cared about gets destroyed. My mother died in childbirth with Gianna. My mentor was killed in a rival family's ambush when I was 19. Every woman I've ever slept with more than once ended up in danger. And now my father is dead because I thought I could have both an empire and something real with you." The words cut deeper than Elena's shard. "What are you saying?" Lucien stood. Sand fell from his soaked clothes. "I'm saying my father was right. Caring is weakness. Love is a weapon people use against you. And I've spent 3 weeks proving that lesson over and over while pretending it didn't apply to us." "Lucien, no." "Go home, Serena. Go back to your family. Forget you ever met me. I'll make sure DeLuca and Elena leave you alone. You'll be safe." "I don't want to be safe. I want to be with you. That's not an option anymore." He turned away. "Marco will get you to a hospital. Then you disappear. New life, new identity if necessary. But you're done with this world." Serena grabbed his arm. "You're pushing me away because you're grieving. I'm pushing you away because every second you stand next to me is another second closer to ending up like my father. Drowned, broken, dead because of choices I made." He pulled free from her grip. "I can survive losing the empire. I can survive federal prosecution. I can survive war with DeLuca and Elena. But I can't survive watching you die because I was selfish enough to want something I was never supposed to have. So that's it? 3 weeks and you just erase us?" "There is no us. There was never an us. There was just me forgetting the rules long enough to get people killed." The rejection felt like drowning. Serena stood there on the beach, watching the man she'd fallen for dismantle everything between them with surgical precision. "You're a coward," she said quietly. Lucien flinched but didn't turn around. "Your father didn't die because you cared about me. He died because Elena Constantine spent 7 years planning revenge and you were the convenient target. Your empire isn't burning because we fell in love. It's burning because you inherited a criminal organization built on violence and eventually that violence came home. Don't blame me for your world's sins, and don't you dare act like pushing me away makes you noble." "Serena, Tom Costa. No, you don't get to do this. You don't get to make me fall for you and then pretend it was all a mistake because things got hard. Either you meant what you said in your grandmother's house or you didn't. Either I'm yours or I'm not. Choose." Lucien stood frozen at the water's edge. Serena watched his shoulders rise and fall with breathing that sounded like it hurt. Then he walked away, down the beach, toward where Marco and Gianna waited with Alessandro's body. He didn't look back. Serena stood there alone as dawn broke fully over New York, painting the wreckage-strewn water in shades of gold and red that looked like the world was on fire. She'd lost everything: her job, her safety, the man she loved, and somehow her father's medical bills were still waiting back home, like none of this had ever mattered. Behind her, sirens approached. Police, Coast Guard. The authorities arriving to clean up the mess of the Moretti family's catastrophic fall. Serena looked down at her hands. They weren't shaking anymore. Maybe that was what surviving looked like. Standing in the wreckage of your life and realizing you were still breathing, still fighting, still refusing to break even when the world demanded it. She walked toward Marco. "Get me to a phone." He blinked. "Miss Vale, I said get me to a phone. I'm not done." Lucien said, "I don't care what Lucien said. He doesn't own me. He never did. The only person who decides my future is me." She met Marco's eyes. "So either help me or get out of my way. But I'm not running. Not from DeLuca. Not from Elena. And definitely not from a man too scared to admit he needs me as much as I need him." Marco stared at her for a long moment. Then slowly, he smiled. The first real smile she'd ever seen from him. "Mr. Moretti has no idea what he just walked away from." "No," Serena agreed, "but he's about to find out." Marco drove Serena to a payphone in Queens, one of the last functioning relics in a city that had moved on to smartphones and digital surveillance. Her hands shook as she dialed, not from fear, from fury. The phone rang 3 times before someone answered. "Moretti residence? This is Serena Vale. I need to speak to Elena Constantine." A pause. "Miss Constantine doesn't take unsolicited calls. Tell her Lucien Moretti's assistant wants to make a deal. Tell her I have information about offshore accounts the FBI doesn't know about. Tell her I'm willing to trade." Serena's voice was steel. "And tell her she has 5 minutes to call this number before I give everything to the federal prosecutors myself." She hung up. Marco watched her with something like respect. "That's a bluff," he said. "You don't have account information." "Elena doesn't know that, and she spent 7 years building her revenge. She won't risk leaving loose ends." Serena checked her watch. "She'll call." 2 minutes later, the payphone rang. Serena answered. "Elena." "Miss Vale?" Elena's voice was silk over razors. "I heard about the plane crash. Tragic. Alessandro was a formidable man." "Cut the pleasantries. I want a meeting." "Why would I meet with you?" "Because Lucien walked away from me this morning, left me on a beach with nothing except the knowledge that you orchestrated his downfall. And because I'm angry enough to burn down everything he's ever built if it means watching you lose too." Silence stretched across the line. Serena could almost hear Elena's mind working, calculating odds, assessing threats. "You're lying," Elena said finally. "You love him. You wouldn't destroy him." "Love him? He blamed me for his father's death, told me I was a weakness he couldn't afford, pushed me away like I was disposable." Serena let bitterness seep into her voice, not entirely fake. "So no, Elena, I don't love him. I hate him, and I want to watch his empire burn as much as you do." Another pause. Then, "The Plaza Hotel, Suite 1847, 1 hour. Come alone or the deal's off." The line went dead. Marco's scarred face had gone pale. "Miss Vale, this is suicide." Elena will kill you the moment you walk through that door. Maybe, or maybe she'll be curious enough to hear me out first. Serena started walking toward Marco's car. Either way, I'm going. Lucien will never forgive me if I let you do this. Lucien doesn't get a vote anymore. They drove through morning traffic toward Manhattan. Serena's side ached where the stitches pulled. Her reflection in the window looked like a stranger, bruised, exhausted, hollow-eyed. The woman who'd walked into Moretti Dominion 3 weeks ago wouldn't recognize this version of herself, but that woman had been naive, desperate, willing to accept whatever scraps of safety the world offered. This version was done accepting scraps. "What's your actual plan?" Marco asked. Because walking into Elena's suite without leverage is just elaborate suicide. Serena pulled out her phone. "I'm recording everything. The moment Elena admits to framing Lucien, to orchestrating Alessandro's death, to coordinating with DeLuca, I send it to every federal agent investigating this case. She'll search you, take your phone. Then I'll hide it, or swallow it, or shove it somewhere uncomfortable. I don't care." Serena met his eyes in the rearview mirror. "Marco, everyone thinks I'm weak because I'm not violent, because I don't carry a gun, because I solve problems with words instead of bullets. But words are weapons too. And Elena Constantine is about to learn that the hard way." Marco's mouth twitched, almost a smile. Mr. Moretti really has no idea what he gave up. "No," Serena agreed, "but he will." The Plaza Hotel rose above Fifth Avenue like a monument to old money and older sins. Serena walked through the gilded lobby wearing borrowed clothes. Marco had grabbed them from a safe house, and every eye that tracked her movement felt like a target being painted on her back. Suite 1847 was on the 18th floor. Serena took the elevator alone, her heart slamming against her ribs. She'd hidden her phone in her bra, the recording app already running. If Elena's security searched her, they'd find it immediately. But maybe they'd underestimate her. Maybe they'd assume she was just a broken girl looking for revenge. The elevator doors opened. 2 guards flanked the suite entrance, both armed, both watching her with the flat assessment of professional killers. "Arms up," one said. Serena raised her arms. The guard patted her down with brutal efficiency. His hands found the phone within seconds. "She's wired," he said, holding up the device. The suite door opened. Elena Constantine stood backlit by floor-to-ceiling windows, wearing white like she was dressed for a funeral. Her silver hair caught the light. "I expected as much," Elena said calmly. "Bring her in. Take the phone." The guards confiscated the device and shoved Serena into the suite. The door locked behind her with a sound like a coffin closing. Elena circled her slowly. "You're cleverer than I gave you credit for, recording our conversation. Very enterprising." "You killed Alessandro Moretti," Serena said. No preamble, no fear. "You coordinated with DeLuca to ambush us at the airport. You tipped off the FBI knowing we'd try to flee. You orchestrated everything." "Yes." Elena's smile was radiant. "I did. And it was magnificent. Watching Lucien's empire crumble, watching his father drown, watching him lose everything he'd built because he was stupid enough to care about you." She stepped closer. "Tell me, Miss Vale, how does it feel knowing you're the reason Alessandro Moretti is dead?" Serena's hands clenched into fists. "I'm not responsible for your revenge, aren't you? If Lucien hadn't been distracted by your red lipstick and your desperate need for a job, he might have noticed my plans. He might have stopped me, but he was too busy protecting you to protect himself. That's not my fault." "Of course it is. You walked into his world. You made him weak. You're as responsible for his fall as I am." Elena's expression turned almost sympathetic. "But I understand the anger. He pushed you away, blamed you, made you feel disposable. That kind of rejection burns, doesn't it?" Serena forced herself to breathe, to think. Elena was baiting her, trying to confirm the story Serena had sold over the phone. "Yes," Serena said quietly. "It burns." "Good. Then you'll understand why I spent 7 years planning this. The Morettis took my husband, left me a widow at 35. Lucien's father gave the order. Lucien inherited the empire built on my husband's blood, so I decided to take everything from them the same way they took everything from me. By framing them for crimes they didn't commit?" "By framing them for crimes they did commit." Elena laughed. The files I gave the FBI? All real. Money laundering, tax evasion, contract killings. The Morettis are criminals, Miss Vale. I simply documented it. And David Chen? Leverage. Everyone has a price. His was his daughter's life. I paid for her treatments. He gave me access to Lucien's accounts. Elena shrugged. Simple transaction. Serena's mind raced. Without the recording, she had nothing. No proof, no leverage. Just Elena's confession in a locked suite where screaming wouldn't carry. So what now? Serena asked. You've won. Lucien's empire is destroyed. His father is dead. The FBI has enough evidence to put him away for decades. Why are you even bothering with me? Because loose ends are dangerous. You know things. You've seen things. And despite Lucien pushing you away, you might still care enough to try helping him. Elena pulled a gun from somewhere behind her back. Small caliber. Efficient. I can't have that. Serena's pulse hammered. If you kill me, the FBI will know. Will they? A heartbroken assistant commits suicide after watching her employer's empire collapse. Tragic, but not suspicious. Elena chambered around. I'm sorry, Miss Vale. You seem like a decent person, but decent people don't survive in this world. The gun rose. Serena dove sideways as the shot cracked through the suite. The bullet punched into the wall behind where she'd been standing. She scrambled toward the door, but the guards blocked it. Elena fired again. The second shot grazed Serena's shoulder, burning like a brand. She crashed into a side table, sending a crystal vase shattering across marble floors. Hold her, Elena ordered. The guards grabbed Serena, forcing her to her knees. Elena walked over, pressing the gun against Serena's temple. Any last words? Elena asked. Serena's mind went blank with terror. Then, through the window, she saw movement on the building across the street. A glint of metal. A scope catching sunlight. Someone was watching. Yes, Serena gasped. You made one mistake. What's that? You assumed I came alone. The window exploded inward. Glass shards flew like shrapnel. One of the guards went down, red blooming across his chest. The other dove for cover. Elena spun toward the window, gun raised. Serena drove her elbow into the woman's stomach. Elena doubled over. Serena grabbed the gun, twisted it free, threw it across the room. More gunfire erupted from outside. Tactical teams rappelling down from the roof. Marco's voice shouting commands through a bullhorn. FBI, drop your weapons! But it wasn't the FBI. It was Marco's private security team, wearing gear that looked official enough to pass. Elena's remaining guard fired at them. They returned fire with devastating precision. Serena crawled toward the door. Her shoulder screamed where the bullet had grazed. Blood soaked through her borrowed shirt. Elena recovered faster than expected. She tackled Serena from behind, both women crashing to the floor in a tangle of limbs and fury. Elena's nails raked across Serena's face. Serena drove her knee into Elena's ribs. They fought like animals, scratching, biting, no technique, just desperate violence. Elena grabbed a shard of broken crystal, swung it toward Serena's throat. Serena caught her wrist. Twisted. The shard fell. Then Serena drove her forehead into Elena's nose. Cartilage crunched. Elena screamed. Blood poured down her white dress. The suite door burst open. Marco and 3 men in tactical gear flooded in, weapons raised. Clear! One shouted. Marco pulled Serena off Elena. Are you hurt? I'll live. Serena's voice shook. Did you get it? Every word. Marco held up a recording device. Parabolic microphone. We've been listening from the building across the street since you walked in. Got her full confession. Elena struggled to her feet, one hand clutching her broken nose. That's inadmissible. Illegally obtained. Maybe. But the court of public opinion doesn't care about admissibility. Marco pulled out his phone, showed her the screen. I just uploaded the recording to every news outlet in New York. By tonight, everyone will know Elena Constantine orchestrated the Moretti family's downfall. Framed them. Murdered Alessandro. You're finished. Elena's face went white, then red. Then she lunged for Marco's gun. He sidestepped easily. One of his men grabbed Elena, forced her to the floor. Get her out of here, Marco said. Hold her somewhere secure until we figure out what to do with her. They dragged Elena toward the door. She fought every step, screaming threats that turned into incoherent rage. Serena collapsed against the wall, adrenaline draining away, leaving only exhaustion and pain. Marco crouched beside her. We need to get you to a hospital. No hospitals, too many questions. She forced herself upright. Where's Lucien? Still at the beach. With his sister and his father's body? He doesn't know you did this. Good. Serena's jaw clenched. Let's keep it that way. Fine. They took Serena to a private clinic in Brooklyn, the same place Lucien had brought her after the Elena's estate raid. The doctor who'd stitched her side now treated her shoulder wound with professional detachment. You're making a habit of this, he said while cleaning the graze, not by choice. The man you're involved with, he's dangerous. I know. And you're staying anyway. I don't know yet. The doctor finished bandaging her shoulder. For what it's worth, most people would have run by now. The fact that you're still here says something. That I'm stupid? That you're strong. There's a difference. Serena left the clinic wearing fresh clothes and a sling for her arm. Marco drove her to a safe house in Queens, different from the brownstone, different from anywhere Lucien would look. What now? Marco asked. Now we wait. Elena's confession will hit the news in a few hours. The FBI will have to reevaluate their case. DeLuca will realize Elena played him. And Lucien, she paused, Lucien will have to decide what he wants to do with the pieces. He'll want to see you. Maybe. Or maybe he'll stay on that beach feeling sorry for himself. Serena's voice hardened. Either way, I'm done chasing him. If he wants me, he knows where to find me. Marco nodded slowly. You've changed, Miss Vale. 3 weeks in a war zone will do that. It's more than that. When you first walked into Moretti Dominion, you were desperate, scared. Now you're... He searched for the word. Dangerous. Serena looked at her reflection in the car window. Bruised face, bandaged shoulder, eyes that had seen too much violence to ever look innocent again. Yeah, she said quietly. I guess I am. The news broke at 6 p.m. Every channel carried it. Elena Constantine's recorded confession, played in its entirety. Her admission to framing the Morettis. Her coordination with David Chen. Her role in orchestrating Alessandro's death. Within an hour, the FBI issued a statement. The investigation into the Moretti family would be reviewed. Charges might be dropped, pending further evidence. Within 2 hours, Elena Constantine was arrested. Not by the FBI. By Vittorio DeLuca's men, who grabbed her from Marco's safe house before federal agents could reach her. DeLuca's going to kill her, Marco said, watching the news footage of Elena being shoved into a black SUV. She used him, made him attack Lucien, cost him resources and reputation. He'll make her death slow. Should we stop him? Serena asked. Can't. DeLuca's compound is a fortress. And honestly, Marco's expression was grim. Elena Constantine deserves whatever she gets. Serena thought about Elena's face when the recording went public, the realization that 7 years of planning had imploded in 90 minutes, the knowledge that she'd become the villain in her own revenge story. No one deserves what DeLuca will do to her, Serena said. Maybe not, but that's not our fight anymore. The news shifted to footage of Alessandro Moretti's body being recovered from Rockaway Beach. Reporters speculated about the plane crash. Federal investigators promised a thorough review. Then Lucien's face filled the screen. He was standing outside a morgue in Manhattan, surrounded by cameras and microphones. Gianna stood beside him, red-eyed from crying. Lucien's expression was carved from granite. My father, he said, his voice carrying across the news broadcast, was a complicated man. He built an empire in a city that doesn't forgive weakness. He made enemies. He made mistakes. But he also raised his children to survive in a world that wants to destroy anyone who refuses to be ordinary. A reporter shouted a question about the FBI investigation. Lucien ignored it. Lucien, Elena Constantine orchestrated a campaign of revenge that cost my father his life. She framed my family for crimes we didn't commit. She manipulated federal agencies and rival families. And she did it all because 15 years ago she chose to blame us for her husband's death instead of accepting that this city eats everyone who stays too long. Another reporter, are you saying your family is innocent? I'm saying my family did what we had to do to survive. Same as the Constantines, same as the DeLucas, same as every family that's ever clawed their way to power in this city. Elena's mistake was thinking revenge would fill the hole her husband's death left. My mistake was thinking I could build something permanent in a world designed to tear everything apart. The cameras flashed, questions overlapped. Will you rebuild? Are you cooperating with the FBI? What about Vittorio De Luca? Lucien looked directly into the camera. For a moment, Serena could have sworn he was looking at her. I'm done running, he said. I'm done apologizing for surviving. Elena wanted to destroy me. She failed. De Luca wants to kill me. He'll fail too. Because I learned something these past 3 weeks. The only thing more dangerous than a man with nothing to lose is a man who's already lost everything and decided to fight anyway. He walked away from the cameras. The news cut to analysts discussing what this meant for organized crime in New York. Marco turned off the television. He's declaring war against De Luca, against anyone else who thinks the Morettis are finished. He can't win that war alone. No, he can't. Marco looked at Serena, which is why he needs you. He pushed me away. Because he was grieving, because he was scared, because watching his father die broke something in him. Marco's scarred face softened, but grief passes, fear fades, and eventually he'll realize the only person who ever saw him as more than a monster was you. Serena's throat tightened. She thought about Lucien's face on the beach, the emptiness in his eyes, the way he'd walked away without looking back. What if he doesn't realize it? She whispered. Then he's a fool, and you deserve better than a fool. Tuck. 3 days passed. Serena stayed in the safe house, healing. Her shoulder stopped bleeding. The stitches in her side held. The bruises on her face faded from purple to yellow-green. She watched the news obsessively, watched Lucien navigate a city that was trying to decide if he was a victim or a criminal. The FBI investigation stalled as Elena's confession complicated everything. Some charges were dropped. Others remained pending. Vittorio De Luca made a public statement claiming he'd been manipulated by Elena Constantine, that the conflict between the Morettis and De Lucas was based on false accusations, that he respected Alessandro's memory and wanted peace. Nobody believed him, but it bought time. On the 4th day, someone knocked on the safe house door. Serena checked the peephole. Her heart stopped. Lucien stood in the hallway, alone. He looked like he hadn't slept in days. His suit was rumpled. Stubble shadowed his jaw. Serena opened the door. They stared at each other. All the words Serena had practiced evaporated. I'm sorry, Lucien said finally, for pushing you away, for blaming you, for being too broken to see that you were the only thing keeping me human. You hurt me. Serena's voice shook. You made me feel disposable. I know. I was wrong. He stepped closer. I've spent 3 days trying to rebuild an empire I'm not sure I want anymore. Negotiating with people I hate, making alliances that feel like surrenders. And the entire time, all I could think about was you on that beach, telling me I was a coward. You are a coward. I know. A ghost of a smile. But I'm trying to be better. Serena's eyes burned. How did you even find me? Marco told me. Said you'd been here healing. Said you took down Elena Constantine without any backup. Said you recorded her confession and released it to the press. Lucien's voice roughened. Said you saved my family's reputation while I was busy wallowing in grief. I didn't do it for you. I know. You did it because you're stronger than I ever gave you credit for. He reached up, cupped her face with devastating gentleness. Serena, I'm not good at this. At feelings. At admitting I need someone. My father spent 30 years teaching me that needing people gets them killed, and then you walked into my world and proved him wrong. How? Because you survived. Every time I tried to protect you by pushing you away, you got stronger. Every time this world tried to break you, you adapted. You're not a weakness, Serena. You're the strongest thing I've ever built. Tears spilled down Serena's cheeks. I can't be your redemption arc. I can't fix you. I can't make this world less violent. I'm not asking you to. I'm asking you to stand beside me while I figure out how to survive it. As an equal. As a partner. Not as someone I protect, but as someone who protects me right back. Serena wanted to say yes, wanted to fall into his arms and pretend the last 4 days hadn't happened, but she'd spent 3 weeks learning this world's rules, and the first rule was never surrender without terms. I have conditions, she said. Lucien's mouth quirked. Of course you do. First, no more pushing me away when things get hard. You don't get to make unilateral decisions about us. We fight together or we don't fight at all. Agreed. Second, I want a real role in your organization, not as an assistant, as someone with authority, someone the other families have to respect. Done. I'll make you consigliere if you want. Second in command. Third, Serena's voice hardened. We take down Vittorio De Luca together. He tried to kill us. He orchestrated the airport ambush. He played a role in Alessandro's death. Elena's already paying for her crimes. De Luca needs to pay for his. Lucien's gray eyes went dark. Dangerous. That's not a condition. That's a war. I know. It could take months, years. It'll be violent, brutal. People will die. I know that too. And you're willing to stay for it? Serena thought about the woman she'd been 3 weeks ago, desperate, naive, wearing borrowed lipstick and hoping a job could save her drowning family. That woman was gone. I'm not just willing to stay, she said. I'm willing to lead. You want to rebuild your empire? Fine, but we do it my way. Smart, strategic. No more mistakes. No more underestimating our enemies. And absolutely no more assuming I'm too weak to handle the darkness. Lucien stared at her like he was seeing her for the first time. Then, slowly, he smiled. A real smile. The kind that transformed his face from dangerous to devastating. You're terrifying, he said. I learned from the best. He kissed her. Not gentle, not tentative, but with the fierce certainty of a man who'd lost everything and found the one thing worth rebuilding for. When they broke apart, both breathing hard, Lucien rested his forehead against hers. We're going to burn this city down, he murmured. I know. And rebuild it in our image. I know that too. And it's going to be the most dangerous thing either of us has ever done. Good. Serena's smile was sharp as knives. I'm tired of being safe. They planned the war against Vittorio De Luca like chess players arranging pieces on a board. Lucien's apartment became a command center. Maps of De Luca's properties covered the walls. Financial records stolen from Elena's estate before Marco's team pulled out filled filing cabinets. Lists of De Luca's allies, his weaknesses, his patterns. Gianna joined them, surprising everyone. She might have been a music teacher, but she had the same Moretti blood as her brother, the same capacity for strategic thinking. De Luca's legitimate businesses fund his criminal operations, she said, pointing to a spreadsheet. 3 restaurants, 2 construction companies, a shipping firm. If we sabotage his cash flow, he can't pay his soldiers, can't maintain alliances, can't fight back effectively. We're not sabotaging, Serena corrected. We're acquiring. Hostile takeovers, perfectly legal. Use shell companies to buy controlling shares. Install our own management. Turn his assets into our assets. Lucien looked at her with something like pride. You've been studying. I had a good teacher. She turned to Marco. What about his security? 20 men on permanent rotation, former military, expensive, loyal because he pays well. Marco's scarred face was thoughtful. But loyalty purchased is loyalty that can be repurchased. How much would it cost to flip them? More than we have liquid. The FBI froze most of our accounts. Then we unfreeze them. Serena pulled up legal documents on her laptop. Elena's confession proves the FBI investigation was built on falsified evidence. We file motions, get judges to review the asset seizures. It'll take time, but eventually we'll get access back. Eventually doesn't help us now, Gianna said. No. But there are other sources of capital. Serena looked at Lucien. Your father built this empire over 3 generations. He must have had emergency funds, liquid assets that couldn't be traced or seized. Lucien was quiet for a long moment. Then he stood and walked to a painting on the wall, an abstract piece that looked like chaos rendered in oil. He removed it carefully, revealing a wall safe behind. My father's emergency fund, he said, opening the safe. Inside were stacks of bearer bonds, gold coins, and cash in multiple currencies. He called it the Empire Reset button. Enough money to rebuild from nothing if everything else burned. Serena stared at the contents. Easily $10 million. Maybe more. That's our war chest, she said. We use it to flip De Luca's security, buy out his businesses, and choke him financially until he has no choice but to negotiate. He won't negotiate, Marco warned. He'll escalate. Try to kill us before we can destroy him. Then we kill him first. Everyone turned to stare at Serena. She met their gazes without flinching. I'm not talking about assassination, she clarified. I'm talking about destroying everything he is, his reputation, his business, his alliances. When we're done, Vittorio De Luca will be so ruined that death would be a mercy. But we'll let him live. Let him watch everything he built collapse the same way he tried to make us watch. Lucien crossed to her, took her face in his hands. You've changed. So have you. Not like this. 3 weeks ago you were trying to save your father's life. Now you're planning corporate warfare and strategic destruction like you've done this your whole life. Maybe I have. Maybe I just never had a reason to show it. Serena's eyes hardened. Or maybe surviving your world required me to become someone who could fight back. Either way, this is who I am now. Do you have a problem with that? No. Lucien kissed her forehead. I'm just sorry you had to become this to survive me. I didn't become this for you. I became this for me. The war began quietly. They started with De Luca's restaurants, used shell companies to approach each owner with offers they couldn't refuse. 2 accepted within a week. The 3rd held out until Serena had Marco's team expose health code violations that mysteriously appeared in every inspection. Within a month, De Luca's restaurant empire belonged to the Morettis. Next came construction. Harder to acquire, but Serena discovered the companies were over-leveraged, drowning in debt. She arranged financing through banks the Morettis controlled, then called in the loans when De Luca couldn't pay. Hostile takeover, perfectly legal, devastating. The shipping company was trickiest. De Luca used it to move illegal goods, drugs, weapons, contraband. Shutting it down meant cutting off his primary income source, but it also meant federal attention. So Serena did something clever. She tipped off the FBI anonymously, gave them enough information to seize the shipping company without implicating the Morettis. Then, while De Luca was dealing with federal investigators, she bought the company's assets at bankruptcy auction. Within 8 weeks, Vittorio De Luca had lost 70% of his legitimate income. His soldiers started grumbling. Paychecks arrived late. Loyalty wavered. Marco began recruiting. Quiet conversations in dark bars, offers to De Luca's men. Better pay, better benefits, better leadership. 5 soldiers switched sides in the first month, 10 more in the second. De Luca's empire was hemorrhaging, and everyone in the city knew who was responsible. Bambik. The confrontation came on a Thursday evening in November. Serena was working in Lucien's apartment when Marco burst through the door, bleeding from a cut above his eye. They hit our warehouse in Red Hook, he gasped. De Luca's remaining men, full assault, casualties on both sides. Lucien was on his feet instantly. How many? 3 of ours dead, 5 wounded. We took out 7 of theirs. Where's the rest of his crew? Retreating. But sir... Marco's expression was grim. De Luca himself was leading them. He's desperate, cornered. This is his last stand. Serena felt ice slide down her spine. A cornered animal was the most dangerous kind. We end this tonight, Lucien said. No more slow bleeding. We go to his compound and finish it. That's suicide, Gianna protested. Even weakened, he still has 30 men in that compound. 23, Serena interrupted. We flipped 7 more this week. I have confirmation. Everyone stared at her. When? Lucien asked. Yesterday. They're waiting for my signal to stand down during the assault. You've been planning this. Of course I have. Did you think I was just filing paperwork? Serena stood, ignoring the protest from her healing shoulder. De Luca is finished. He just doesn't know it yet. We go in tonight with overwhelming force. His own men betray him. We take him alive. And then we make him watch while we dismantle the last pieces of his empire. Lucien looked at her like she was a force of nature he'd accidentally unleashed. You're sure about this? He asked quietly. I'm sure. Because once we do this, there's no going back. We'll own this city, or we'll die trying. Serena thought about her father, still fighting cancer in a hospital bed she could finally afford. Thought about her mother, who called every week asking when Serena was coming home. Thought about the woman she'd been before walking into Moretti Dominion. That woman wouldn't recognize this version of Serena, wouldn't understand the choices she'd made, wouldn't approve of the violence she was about to unleash. But that woman had been drowning. This woman knew how to swim in blood. "I'm sure," Serena said again. Lucien nodded. "Then we go to war." Okay. They assembled the team at midnight. 40 soldiers, everyone loyal to the Morettis, plus the 7 defectors from De Luca's compound who had opened the gates from inside. Marco distributed weapons. Ghost ran through tactical plans. Gianna coordinated communications. And Serena stood beside Lucien, wearing body armor that felt like carrying the weight of 3 weeks' worth of choices. "Last chance to walk away," Lucien murmured. "You know I won't." "I know, but I had to offer." He kissed her, hard, desperate, like he was trying to memorize the taste of her in case this was the last time. Then they loaded into vehicles and drove through Brooklyn toward Red Hook, toward De Luca's compound, toward the final confrontation that would decide whether the Moretti Empire lived or died. The compound looked like a fortress, concrete walls, guard towers, spotlights sweeping across the perimeter. But the gates opened exactly when Serena's contacts said they would. The 7 defectors had kept their word. "Go!" Lucien ordered. They poured through the gates like a flood. De Luca's remaining loyal soldiers opened fire. The night exploded into chaos, gunshots, screaming, the acrid smell of cordite and fear. Serena stayed behind Lucien and Marco, just like they'd planned. But when a guard appeared from nowhere, gun raised toward Lucien's unprotected back, Serena didn't hesitate. She grabbed a fallen weapon, aimed, fired. The guard went down. Lucien spun, saw the body, saw Serena holding the smoking gun. "I had it handled," she said. His expression was unreadable. Then he nodded and kept moving. They fought through the compound, room by room, floor by floor. De Luca's men fought with the desperation of people who knew they were finished. But desperation wasn't enough against overwhelming numbers and betrayal from within. Within 20 minutes, the compound was theirs. They found Vittorio De Luca in his office on the top floor, alone, holding a gun with no bullets left. He looked at Lucien, at Serena, at the soldiers filling his doorway. "You won," he said simply. "Yes." Lucien's voice was empty of triumph. "We won. So kill me. Get it over with." "No." Serena stepped forward. "You don't get the easy way out. You orchestrated Alessandro Moretti's death. You tried to kill us at the airport. You waged war against a family trying to survive. And now you're going to spend the rest of your life watching everything you built belong to us." De Luca's face twisted. "I'd rather die." "I know. That's why we're letting you live." She turned to Marco. "Strip him of everything. Assets, property, bank accounts. Leave him with nothing except the clothes he's wearing. Then put him on a plane to anywhere that isn't New York. If he ever comes back, he dies." Marco smiled. "With pleasure." They dragged De Luca out of his own compound. He fought, screamed, threatened. But 40 guns pointed at him made his threats meaningless. When it was over, Serena stood in De Luca's former office, looking out over Brooklyn. The sun was rising, painting the city in shades of gold and amber. Lucien appeared beside her. "It's done." "Yes. You killed someone tonight." "I know." "How do you feel?" Serena thought about the guard's face, the way he'd crumpled, the weight of the gun in her hands. "I don't know yet," she said honestly. "Ask me in a year." Lucien pulled her close. They stood there together, watching New York wake up to a new reality. The Morettis had survived, had won, had rebuilt their empire from the ashes of Alessandro's death. "What now?" Serena asked. "Now we figure out what kind of empire we want to build, whether we follow my father's path or find a different one." "Different how?" "I don't know yet." Lucien's hand found hers. "But I know I want to build it with you." Serena looked at their joined hands, covered in gunpowder residue and other people's blood. The hands of people who'd survived a war neither of them had wanted. "I need to see my father," she said suddenly. "I haven't visited him since this started. For all I know, he's alive." Lucien's voice was gentle. "I've been paying his medical bills, making sure he gets the best care. Your mother doesn't know it's coming from me, but I've had people checking on them every week." Tears burned Serena's eyes. "Why?" "Because you matter. which means they matter, which means I protect them the same way I protect you. Serena turned in his arms, looked up at the man who'd shot someone in front of her, who'd declared war on his enemies, who'd rebuilt an empire on violence and blood, who'd also paid her father's medical bills without being asked. "I love you," she whispered. Lucien's breath caught. "Don't say that unless you mean it." "I mean it. I love you. Not despite what you are, but because I finally understand that you're not just a monster or a man. You're both. And I'm choosing both." He kissed her like she was oxygen and he'd been drowning. When they broke apart, his gray eyes were wet. "I love you too," he said roughly. "Even though I shouldn't, even though it makes me weak, even though I spent 3 weeks trying to push you away because I was terrified of exactly this." "We're not weak." Serena's voice was steel. "We're the most dangerous thing this city has ever seen because we survived together when everyone said we'd die alone." Lucien smiled, genuine, warm, the kind of smile that made him look years younger. "Let's go home," he said. They walked out of DeLuca's former compound hand in hand, ready to face whatever came next. Behind them, the sun rose over Brooklyn like the world was starting over. And maybe it was. The hospital room smelled like antiseptic and dying flowers. Serena stood in the doorway, frozen by the sight of her father in the bed, thinner than she remembered, skin gray like old newspaper, but his eyes still sharp when they found hers. "Serena," his voice was a rasp. "You look different." She crossed the room slowly, aware of every bruise still healing on her face, every scar hidden beneath her clothes. "I am different." Her mother rose from the chair beside the bed. Eleanor Vale had aged 10 years in 3 weeks, new lines around her mouth, gray threading through her dark hair. She pulled Serena into a fierce hug. "Where have you been?" Eleanor's voice cracked. "You called once and then nothing. No messages, no visits. I thought—" She couldn't finish. "I'm sorry." Serena held her mother tight, breathing in the familiar scent of lavender soap and exhaustion. The job became complicated. Complicated. Her father's laugh was bitter. "That's one word for it. We've been watching the news, Serena. The Moretti family. The FBI investigation. The plane crash that killed Alessandro Moretti. And somehow, impossibly, we knew you were in the middle of it." Serena pulled away from her mother, sat in the empty chair. "How?" "Because 3 weeks ago, you were desperate for money to save my life. Then suddenly all my medical bills were paid in full. The experimental treatment I couldn't afford? Approved. The specialists who wouldn't see me? Suddenly available." Her father's gray eyes, so like her own, studied her face. "That kind of money doesn't appear from nowhere. That kind of intervention requires power. The kind of power that comes from people like Lucien Moretti." The name hung in the air like smoke. Eleanor sank back into her chair. "Tell us the truth, please." So Serena did. She told them about walking into Moretti Dominion wearing borrowed lipstick, about Lucien's gray eyes and the way he'd looked at her like she was a problem he couldn't solve, about learning his empire was built on violence and choosing to stay anyway, about Elena Constantine's revenge and Alessandro's death and the war that had consumed everything. She left out the worst parts: the shooting at the museum, the knife fight in Elena's suite, pulling a trigger and watching a man fall. Some truths were too heavy to share. When she finished, the hospital room was silent except for the beeping monitors. Her father spoke first. "Are you safe now?" "Safer than I was." "DeLuca's gone. Elena's arrested. The FBI investigation is falling apart." "That's not what I asked." Serena met his eyes. "No, Dad, I'm not safe. I'm involved with a man who runs a criminal empire. I've made enemies who would kill me if they could reach me. I've done things that would horrify you if you knew the details. But I'm alive, and I'm choosing this life with my eyes open." "Why?" Her mother's voice was barely a whisper. "Because for the first time in my life, I'm not drowning. I'm not desperate. I'm not accepting whatever scraps the world offers. I have power, choice, agency, and yes, it came at a terrible cost. But I'd rather pay that cost than spend the rest of my life wondering what I could have been if I'd been brave enough to reach for it." Her father's hand found hers. His grip was weak but steady. "Your mother and I raised you to be good, honest, safe." "I know. But maybe we were wrong. Maybe safe isn't the same as alive. He coughed, wet and rattling. Eleanor handed him water. When he could speak again, his voice was softer. I'm proud of you, Serena, for surviving, for fighting, for refusing to let this world break you the way it breaks most people. Tears burned Serena's eyes. Even knowing what I've become? Especially knowing what you've become. Because you're still here, still my daughter, still the girl who used to read me poetry before bed and believed the world was fundamentally good. He squeezed her hand. You just learned the world is more complicated than good and evil. That's called growing up. Serena's tears spilled over. She pressed her forehead against her father's hand and let herself cry. For the innocence she'd lost, for the violence she'd witnessed, for the woman she'd had to become to survive Lucien Moretti's world. Her mother's hand settled on her shoulder. We love you, no matter what, no matter who you had to become. You're still ours. They sat like that for a long time. Three people bound by blood and survival and the understanding that love meant accepting the parts of each other that didn't make sense. Finally, Serena pulled herself together. I need to go, but I'll come back, every week. I promise. Bring him next time, her father said. Lucien, I want to meet the man who changed my daughter's life. Are you sure? No. But I want to look him in the eye and decide for myself whether he's worth what you've sacrificed. Serena nodded, kissed her father's forehead, hugged her mother one more time. As she walked out of the hospital, she felt something shift inside her chest. Not healing exactly, but acknowledgement. Her family knew. They'd chosen to love her anyway. That was more than most people got. Marco waited by the car. Everything okay? Better than expected. Serena slid into the back seat. Take me to Lucien. She found him at the brownstone, his grandmother's house that had become their refuge during the worst of the war. He sat at the piano, finally pressing the keys, playing something slow and melancholy that Serena didn't recognize. She stood in the doorway, listening. Lucien's fingers moved across the keys with practiced grace, pulling music from wood and wire that sounded like grief and hope tangled together. When the song ended, he spoke without turning. How's your father? Alive. Fighting. Asking to meet you. That made Lucien turn. He knows. I told them everything. Well, most of everything. Some details are better left unsaid. Serena crossed to the piano. He wants to look you in the eye and decide if you're worth what I've sacrificed. What have you sacrificed? Serena thought about the question. My innocence. My safety. My belief that the world rewards goodness. My ability to sleep through the night without nightmares. She sat beside him on the piano bench. But I also gained things. Power. Purpose. You. So maybe sacrifice is the wrong word. Maybe it's just transformation. Lucien's hand found hers on the keys. I destroyed you. No. You gave me the tools to rebuild myself into something stronger. There's a difference. Is there? Because I look at you and I see someone who had to become violent to survive proximity to me. Someone who killed a man 3 weeks ago and hasn't processed it yet. Someone who orchestrated the dismantling of a criminal empire before she turned 25. That's not transformation. That's corruption. Then we're both corrupted. And we're both still here. Still breathing. Still choosing each other. Serena turned on the bench to face him fully. Lucien, I'm not the naive girl who walked into your office wearing borrowed lipstick. I never will be again. But I'm also not broken. I'm just different. And you need to decide if you can love this version of me or if you're going to spend the rest of our lives mourning who I used to be. Lucien's gray eyes searched her face. I love this version of you. I'm just terrified I'll destroy her too. You won't. Because this version fights back. He pulled her close, buried his face in her hair. They sat like that while afternoon light filtered through the brownstone's dusty windows, and somewhere in the distance, sirens wailed through Brooklyn. My father's funeral is tomorrow, Lucien said quietly. Private ceremony. Just family and the people who actually cared about him rather than his empire. Will you come? Of course. Gianna's leaving afterward, going to Europe. She says she needs distance from New York, from the family business, from everything that reminds her of Dad. Are you letting her go? I can't stop her. She's 25. She deserves a life that isn't shaped by violence. His voice roughened. I just wish I could give her that without her having to run away to find it. Serena understood what he wasn't saying, that Lucien wanted the same thing, a life not shaped by violence. But unlike Gianna, he couldn't run. The empire was his. The responsibility was his. The choice to stay and fight was his. What will you do? She asked. With the empire. With everything you've rebuilt. I don't know yet. The FBI investigation is ongoing. Most charges have been dropped, but they're still watching. DeLuca's properties are legally ours now. I have an army of lawyers making sure the acquisition holds up in court. And the Constantine family. He paused. Elena's still in prison, awaiting trial. Her family wants revenge, but they're too fractured to mount an effective attack. So you won. The Morettis control the city. Do we? Or did we just trade one kind of war for another? Lucien stood, paced to the window. My father spent 30 years building this empire, fought off rivals, survived federal investigations, created something that should have lasted generations. And it took Elena Constantine less than a year to nearly destroy it all. What does that say about the whole endeavor? That empires built on violence are inherently unstable. Yes, which is why I'm thinking about changing the foundation. Serena joined him at the window. Changing it how? Going legitimate. Actually legitimate, not just the appearance of it. Selling off the criminal operations, keeping only the legal businesses, restaurants, construction, real estate. Building something that can survive me. The other families won't allow it. They'll see it as weakness. Let them. I'm done fighting wars that don't matter. I'm done sacrificing people I care about to maintain power I'm not sure I want. He turned to face her. My father died for this empire. I won't let anyone else die for it, especially not you. Serena heard the resolve in his voice, the exhaustion, the man who'd spent 3 weeks at war and discovered he hated what victory required. It'll take years, she said. Unwinding the criminal operations, convincing people you're serious, building something legitimate enough that you can't be touched. I know. And you'll make enemies. People who profit from the current system won't want it to change. I know that too. So why do it? Lucien cupped her face in his hands. Because I want a future with you that doesn't involve bulletproof vests and safe houses. Because I want to sleep without checking security cameras. Because I want to build something my children, if we have children, won't be ashamed to inherit. His voice dropped. Because 3 weeks ago, I watched my father drown, saving people he loved. And I realized the only legacy worth leaving is one that doesn't require the next generation to be monsters to maintain it. Serena felt something crack open in her chest. Hope, maybe. Or the beginning of belief that they could actually survive this. Okay, she whispered. Let's build it, together. Alessandro Moretti's funeral was held in a small cemetery in Westchester, far from the city he'd ruled for 3 decades. The service was quiet, dignified. Only 20 people attended. Lucien, Gianna, a handful of soldiers who'd served Alessandro for years, and Serena. No press, no spectacle. Just a man being buried by the people who'd known him as more than a crime lord. The priest, against Serena's expectations, but apparently Alessandro had maintained some traditions, spoke about legacy and sacrifice and the complexity of human souls. Lucien stood rigid throughout, his face carved from granite. When it was over, when the casket had been lowered and the first shovel of dirt thrown, Gianna approached Serena. Thank you, she said quietly, for staying with him, for keeping him human when this world tried to turn him into something else. I didn't do that. He's always been human. No, he's always been capable of humanity. There's a difference. Gianna's gray eyes, so like her brother's, studied Serena. Our father raised Lucien to be the perfect successor, taught him to value power over people, strategy over emotion, survival over everything. And for 20 years, Lucien lived that way. Then you walked in and reminded him there were things worth valuing more than survival. I'm not sure that's true. It is. I've watched my brother for 25 years. I know when he's pretending to be fine and when he's actually feeling something real. With you, he feels. Gianna squeezed Serena's hand. take care of him, and don't let him convince himself he has to be the monster our father was. He gets to choose who he becomes. Make sure he remembers that." Then Gianna walked away, toward the car that would take her to the airport and a new life in Paris. Lucien stood alone by his father's grave. Serena approached slowly, giving him space to grieve. "He never told me he loved me," Lucien said without turning. "Not once in 32 years. I don't know if he was capable of it, or if he just thought saying it would make me weak. Maybe both." "Maybe." Lucien's jaw clenched. "I used to think that made him strong, that withholding love was proof he understood the world better than everyone else. Now I think it just made him lonely. You're not him. No. But I'm his son, his legacy, the man he shaped into his image. How do I separate what he taught me from who I actually am?" Serena thought about her own father's words in the hospital, about growing up meaning you learned the world was more complicated than good and evil. "You don't separate it," she said. "You acknowledge that he gave you tools, some good, some terrible, and then you decide which tools to keep using and which ones to put down. You're his son, but you're also your own person. Those things can coexist." Lucien finally turned to look at her. "I want to marry you." The words hit like thunder. Serena's breath caught. "What?" "Not now. Not tomorrow. But eventually. When the dust settles and the empire is stable and we've figured out how to build something that doesn't require constant warfare. I want to marry you." His voice was raw, because my father died without telling the people he loved that he loved them. And I refuse to make that mistake. I love you, Serena Vale, and I want to spend whatever years I have left proving it. Tears streamed down Serena's face. "That's the worst proposal I've ever heard." "I know, I'll do better when I actually ask, with a ring and everything." A ghost of a smile touched his mouth. "But I needed you to know, here, at my father's grave, that I'm choosing differently than he did. I'm choosing you. I'm choosing us. I'm choosing to build something worth inheriting instead of something that has to be endured." Serena closed the distance between them, kissed him with the salt of tears and grief and desperate hope mixing together. "Yes," she whispered against his mouth. "Eventually, when the time is right. Yes." They stood there among the gravestones while wind rustled through trees and the sun slowly set over Westchester, painting the world in shades of amber and gold. Behind them, Alessandro Moretti's grave marker stood simple and stark. His name, his dates, nothing else. No mention of empire or power or the violence he'd built his life around. Just a man who'd lived and died and left behind children who had to figure out what his legacy meant. But 6 months passed. The FBI officially dropped all charges against Lucien Moretti in February. Insufficient evidence, they claimed. Though everyone knew the real reason was Elena Constantine's recorded confession had poisoned their entire case. Elena herself went to trial in March. Conspiracy. Fraud. Accessory to murder. The jury deliberated for 6 hours before returning guilty verdicts on all counts. 30 years in federal prison. She'd be 75 before she saw freedom again. Vittorio De Luca was spotted in Argentina, living in a modest apartment and working as a consultant for a shipping company. Broken. Forgotten. Exactly the fate Serena had designed for him. The Moretti empire underwent radical transformation. Lucien sold off the criminal operations, the gambling, the drugs, the protection rackets, to families in other cities. Used the money to legitimize everything else. The restaurants became a legitimate dining empire. The construction companies bid on city contracts and won. The real estate portfolio grew. It wasn't fast. It wasn't easy. And it certainly wasn't bloodless. 3 people died in the transition when rival families tried to take advantage of what they perceived as weakness. But by August, the Moretti organization looked more like a corporation than a crime family. Lawyers replaced enforcers. Accountants replaced bagmen. The violence didn't disappear entirely. It never would in their world. But it became the exception rather than the rule. Serena became Lucien's official partner in September. Not just girlfriend, not just advisor, equal partner in every business decision. The other families hated it. A woman with real power challenged every outdated tradition they'd maintained for generations. Serena didn't care. She'd earned her place through intelligence, strategy, and the willingness to do what needed to be done. Let them hate her. She was too busy building an empire to worry about their opinions. Her father went into remission in October. Not cured, cancer was never truly cured, but stable. Fighting. Living. He met Lucien twice during those months. The first meeting was tense, full of weighted silences and careful assessments. The second was easier. By the third, they were discussing philosophy and music and the nature of power with the kind of intellectual respect that transcended their vastly different lives. Eleanor took longer to accept Lucien. Mothers protected their children differently than fathers. But eventually, watching Serena thrive instead of merely survive, Eleanor softened. "He's dangerous," she told Serena one afternoon in November. "But so are you now. Maybe that's what love looks like in your world." Maybe it was. December brought snow to New York. Serena stood in the brownstones' living room. They'd been restoring it slowly, keeping his grandmother's touches, but adding their own, watching white flakes fall past the windows. The piano had been restored. Lucien played every morning now, the way his grandmother used to. Chopin, Debussy, sometimes improvised pieces that sounded like conversations between hope and grief. The house was different now. Lived in. Warm. No longer a museum to a dead woman, but a home for two people trying to figure out how to build a life together. Serena heard the front door open. Lucien's footsteps on the hardwood. She turned as he entered, dusting snow from his coat. "How was the meeting?" she asked. "Productive. The Constantine family wants peace. Officially. They're tired of fighting a war Elena started." He hung his coat. "I accepted." "Good. We could use fewer enemies. We could use fewer complications." Lucien crossed to her, wrapped his arms around her waist from behind. They stood together watching snow fall. "I have something for you. It's not Christmas yet." "I know, but I couldn't wait." He pulled a small box from his pocket, velvet, antique. Serena's heart started hammering. "Lucien, I'm doing this properly this time." He turned her to face him. Then, to her shock, he dropped to one knee on his grandmother's hardwood floor. "Serena Vale, 6 months ago you walked into my world wearing borrowed lipstick and refused to leave even when I gave you every reason to run. You survived war, you survived me. You became someone so strong that sometimes I forget you used to be the person desperately looking for a job to save her father." Tears already blurred Serena's vision. "You're fierce," Lucien continued. "You're brilliant. You're terrifying when you need to be and gentle when I've forgotten how to be human. You've seen the worst parts of me and chosen to stay anyway. And I know I don't deserve you. I know our life together will never be simple or safe or anything resembling normal, but I'm asking anyway." He opened the box. Inside sat a ring, emerald-cut diamonds surrounded by smaller stones, set in platinum. Simple, elegant, devastating. "Will you marry me?" Lucien's voice cracked. "Will you build this strange, complicated, occasionally violent life with me? Will you be my partner in every sense of the word until one of us stops breathing?" Serena sank to her knees in front of him, cupped his face in her hands. "You're right. Our life will never be simple. We'll always have enemies. We'll always be looking over our shoulders. We'll always carry the weight of choices most people can't imagine making." "That's not a yes." "I'm getting there." She smiled through tears. "Yes, Lucien Moretti. I'll marry you. I'll build this life with you. I'll be your partner and your conscience, and the person who reminds you that being powerful doesn't mean being monstrous. I'll stand beside you when the world tries to tear us apart, and I'll fight with you when we disagree, and I'll love you even when loving you is the most complicated thing I've ever done." Lucien's hand shook as he slid the ring onto her finger. It fit perfectly, like it had been made for her. Like everything that had happened over the past 6 months, the violence, the loss, the transformation, had been leading to this moment. He kissed her. Soft at first, then deeper, pouring 6 months of survival and grief and desperate hope into the press of his mouth against hers. When they broke apart, both breathing hard, Serena laughed. "We're engaged." "We are. Your grandmother would have hated me. She would have loved you. You're exactly as stubborn as she was." Lucien stood, pulled Serena to her feet. "When?" "When what?" "When do you want to get married?" Serena thought about it. "Spring. After the winter passes. After we've had time to make sure the empire is actually stable. After we're sure we can have one day that's just about us instead of about survival." Spring, Lucien agreed. I can wait until spring. They stood together in the brownstones' living room while snow fell outside and the piano waited silently in the corner and the future stretched ahead of them like unwritten music. Psych. The wedding happened in April, on a Sunday afternoon in the brownstones' small backyard. They'd spent months restoring the garden, planting roses and jasmine, repairing the old stone fountain, building something beautiful from neglect. 25 people attended. Serena's parents, Marco and his wife, Ghost, and a handful of soldiers who'd become friends. Gianna flew in from Paris, bringing stories of art school and a life lived far from violence. A handful of Lucien's legitimate business partners. A judge who owed them a favor and was willing to officiate. No press, no spectacle, no mob families pretending to celebrate while calculating weaknesses. Just two people who'd survived a war getting married in a garden that smelled like spring and possibility. Serena wore a dress the color of champagne, simple, elegant, nothing like the borrowed clothes she'd worn walking into Moretti Dominion 9 months ago. Her mother cried through the entire ceremony. Her father stood beside her, thin but alive, giving her away with hands that trembled but held firm. Lucien wore a dark suit and an expression of wonder, like he couldn't quite believe this was real, that he got to have this, that survival had led to something other than more survival. The vows were traditional, the kiss was not, fierce and possessive and full of everything they'd been through to reach this moment. Afterward, they danced in the garden while string musicians played and champagne flowed, and everyone pretended for one afternoon that they were just normal people celebrating love. Marco approached Serena during a break between dances. "You did it," he said simply. "You survived him, survived this world, built something that looks like it might actually last." "We did it," Serena corrected. "All of us, together." "Maybe. But you were the catalyst. The thing that made Lucien remember there were options other than his father's path." Marco's scarred face softened into something almost like affection. "For what it's worth, I'm glad you walked into that conference room wearing red lipstick, even if it nearly got us all killed." Serena laughed. "Me too, most days." "Only most days? Some days I wonder what would have happened if I'd just walked away. Found a different job. Let the foreclosure happen. Watched my father die because I wasn't desperate enough to sign my life over to a man I didn't understand. You'd have survived. You always survive. But you wouldn't have lived. There's a difference." "Yeah," Serena said softly. "There is." Lucien appeared, offering his hand. "Dance with me, Mrs. Moretti." The name still sounded strange, foreign, like trying on someone else's identity. But Serena took his hand anyway. They danced while the sun set over Brooklyn, and their guests laughed, and the string quartet played something slow and sweet. Lucien held her close, his breath warm against her ear. "What are you thinking?" he murmured. "That 9 months ago I was drowning. Now I'm married to a former Mafia boss in a garden we rebuilt together. Life is strange." "Regrets?" "Hundreds. But not about this. Not about you." She pulled back to look at him. "What are you thinking?" "That my father would have hated this wedding. Too small, too personal, too much emotion on display." Lucien's gray eyes were soft. "And that I'm glad he's not here to tell me I'm doing it wrong, because this feels right in ways his version of life never did. We're building something different. We are. Something that might actually outlive us." They danced until the stars came out, until the guests started leaving, until it was just the two of them in the garden with champagne bottles and discarded flowers and the quiet understanding that they'd survived long enough to reach this. What? 2 years passed. The Moretti organization became completely legitimate by the end of the first year. No more criminal operations, no more looking over shoulders, just a successful business empire built on restaurants, construction, and real estate. The transformation wasn't smooth. 3 separate attempts were made on Lucien's life by families who felt betrayed by his choice to go legitimate. Serena survived one attempt herself, a bomb planted in her car that she discovered purely by accident when her keys fell and she had to crawl under the vehicle to retrieve them. But they survived. They adapted. They built security sophisticated enough that eventually the attempts stopped because everyone realized the Morettis were too well protected and too irrelevant to organized crime to be worth the effort. Serena's father lived to see his granddaughter. Grace Moretti was born on a Tuesday in February, 8 pounds 6 ounces, with her father's gray eyes and her mother's determination. Lucien cried when he first held her, actual tears streaming down his face as he stared at this tiny person who was entirely dependent on him. "I don't know how to do this," he whispered to Serena in the hospital room. "My father never taught me how to be gentle, how to love something this fragile." "Then we'll figure it out together, the same way we figured out everything else." They brought Grace home to the brownstone, converted one of the bedrooms into a nursery painted soft yellow with clouds on the ceiling. Lucien read poetry to her every night, Yeats and Neruda and Rumi, the same poets his grandmother had loved. Serena watched him transform. The hard edges softened, the constant vigilance relaxed into something that almost looked like peace. He still worked too much, still carried the weight of decisions that had cost lives, but he also learned to laugh at Grace's baby noises and panic over every cough and stay up all night rocking her when she couldn't sleep. "You're a good father," Serena told him one night, watching him pace the nursery with Grace against his shoulder. "I'm terrified I'll mess her up the way my father messed me up." "You won't, because you're aware of the possibility, because you're actively trying to be different. That's already more than he gave you." Lucien looked at his daughter's sleeping face. "I want her to grow up never knowing what I used to be, never understanding that her father once ordered people killed, never having to carry the weight of this family's history. Then we make sure she doesn't. We build something so far removed from that world that she can't even imagine it." Serena joined him, running her finger along Grace's tiny hand. "We give her what we never had, actual safety, actual peace, the chance to be boring and normal and gloriously ordinary. Is that possible? I don't know. But we're going to try." They stood together in the nursery while Brooklyn slept outside, and their daughter breathed softly between them, oblivious to the violence her parents had survived to give her this life. Serena's father died on a quiet morning in March, 3 months after meeting his granddaughter. The cancer came back aggressive and fast. 1 week he was playing with Grace. The next he was in hospice. The week after that he was gone. The funeral was small, peaceful. Everything Alessandro Moretti's funeral hadn't been. They buried him beside Serena's grandmother in a cemetery that smelled like fresh earth and early spring flowers. Eleanor held Grace through the service, tears streaming silently down her face. Lucien stood beside Serena, his hand firm in hers, lending strength when her knees wanted to buckle. At the graveside, Serena read a poem her father had loved, something about memory and continuity and how the dead live on through the people who carry their stories. Afterward, Marco found her standing alone beneath a tree. "He was proud of you," he said. "Your father. The last time I saw him, he told me you'd become something he never expected, strong in ways he didn't know how to teach you to be." "Did he say anything else?" "He said you survived by becoming dangerous, and that maybe dangerous was what the world needed more women to be." Marco's scarred face creased into something like a smile. "He also said Lucien better treat you right, or he'd haunt him from beyond the grave. I assured him that wouldn't be necessary." Serena laughed through tears. "That sounds like him." "He loved you very much. Even when he couldn't understand your choices, he loved you." "I know. That's what made leaving him so hard." They stood in silence for a while. Then Marco asked, "Do you ever regret it? Walking into that conference room, signing Lucien's contract, everything that came after?" Serena thought about the question, really thought about the woman she'd been, desperate, drowning, willing to accept any lifeline, about the woman she'd become, dangerous, powerful, carrying scars that would never fully heal. "No," she said finally. "I don't regret it. I regret that people died. I regret the violence. I regret that my father spent his last years worrying about whether I'd survive the life I chose. But I don't regret choosing Lucien. Don't regret becoming someone strong enough to survive beside him. Don't regret learning that the world is more complicated than I was raised to believe." "That's quite an answer. It's an honest one." Marco nodded slowly. "For what it's worth, I'm glad you walked into that conference room too. You saved Lucien from becoming his father. That's worth something. Maybe. Or maybe he was always going to find a different path and I just happened to be there when he did. Don't diminish what you've done, what you've built. You took a criminal empire and turned it into something that might actually last. That's legacy." Serena looked across the cemetery at Lucien, who was talking quietly with Eleanor while holding Grace, her husband, her daughter. Her family built from the ruins of violence and choices that still sometimes kept her awake at night. Yeah, she said softly. Maybe it is. He chussits. 5 years after Serena walked into Moretti Dominion wearing borrowed red lipstick, she stood in that same conference room on the 12th floor. The room had been completely renovated. New furniture, new art, new everything designed to erase the memory of cigar smoke and dangerous men making deadlier decisions. Now it was a legitimate boardroom where legitimate business happened. The company was called Moretti Enterprises. Publicly traded, transparent, everything Alessandro Moretti would have hated. Serena ran the board meeting with practiced efficiency, quarterly reports, expansion plans, the opening of 3 new restaurants in California, everything above board, everything legal. When the meeting ended, she stood alone in the empty conference room for a moment, remembered the terrified 24-year-old who'd pushed open these doors desperate for salvation, remembered Lucien's gray eyes locking onto her crimson lips, remembered the first words he'd spoken to her. You walked into my world wearing a target. He'd been right. She had been wearing a target. She just hadn't realized she'd also been carrying a weapon. Lucien appeared in the doorway. 5 years had aged him, gray threading through his dark hair, lines around his eyes that came from laughter as much as stress. He looked at her with the same intensity he'd had that first day, but now it was softened by familiarity and love and the shared understanding of everything they'd survived together. Ready to go home? He asked. Home. The brownstone where Grace was probably demanding her father read her 3 books before bed, where the piano sat waiting for Lucien's evening ritual, where they'd built something that looked nothing like the empire his father had ruled and everything like a life worth living. Yes, Serena said. Let's go home. They walked out of Moretti Enterprises together, leaving behind the ghosts of who they'd been and carrying forward the people they'd chosen to become. The elevator descended. Lucien took her hand. Do you ever miss it? He asked quietly. The danger, the intensity, the feeling that everything mattered because everything could end at any moment. Serena considered the question. Sometimes, late at night when Grace is asleep and everything's quiet, and I remember what it felt like to be that alive with fear and adrenaline and desperate hope. But then I remember that version of us was slowly destroying itself, and I'm glad we chose differently. Even though it meant giving up power, we didn't give up power. We transformed it, turned it into something that doesn't require constant warfare to maintain. She squeezed his hand. That's more powerful than anything your father built, because it'll outlast us. Grace will inherit a business, not a war. That matters. The elevator doors opened. They walked through the lobby where Serena had first entered 9 months pregnant with desperation. Now she walked out married, powerful, carrying the weight of choices that had reshaped an empire. On the street, spring rain was falling, gentle, cleansing, washing the city clean. Lucien opened an umbrella. They walked together through Brooklyn while rain tapped against fabric, and somewhere in the distance sirens wailed and life continued in all its complicated, messy, beautiful chaos. I love you, Lucien said suddenly. I don't say it enough, but I need you to know. Everything good in my life traces back to the moment you refused to leave when I gave you the chance. I love you too, even though loving you cost me everything I thought I was, and gave you everything you actually needed. Maybe. Or maybe I just learned to want different things. Serena looked up at him through the rain. Either way, I'm here. I'm yours. And I'm not going anywhere. They walked home through Brooklyn rain, 2 people who'd survived war and chosen peace, carrying between them the understanding that love in their world looked like survival and grace in equal measure. At the brownstone, Grace ran to meet them at the door, chattering about butterflies and the picture she'd drawn and the cookie she'd helped Eleanor bake. Lucien scooped her up, spinning her until she shrieked with laughter. Serena watched them, her husband and daughter, the family she'd built from the ruins of desperation, and felt something settle in her chest that might have been contentment. The world outside was still dangerous, still complicated, still full of people who remembered the Morettis as criminals rather than entrepreneurs. But inside the brownstone, in this moment, they were just a family having dinner and laughing and building memories that had nothing to do with violence. That night, after Grace was asleep and Eleanor had gone home, Serena found Lucien at the piano. He was playing something new, composed himself, still rough around the edges but beautiful in its imperfection. She sat beside him on the bench. "What's this one called?" "Haven't named it yet. I'm thinking redemption, or maybe survival." "How about beginning?" Lucien's hands stilled on the keys. "Beginning? Because that's what this is. Not the end of the story. Not the happily ever after. Just the beginning of everything we're building. The rest gets written as we live it." He smiled, full and genuine, the kind of smile that transformed his face into something almost innocent. "Beginning. I like that." He played the piece again, this time with Serena's hand over his on the keys, both of them creating music from wood and wire and all the complicated choices that had brought them here. Outside, Brooklyn settled into evening. Cars passed. People lived their lives. The city that had tried to destroy them kept turning, indifferent to their survival. But inside the brownstone, in his grandmother's house that had become their home, Lucien Moretti and Serena Vale Moretti built something his father had never imagined. A future worth living for instead of one worth dying to protect. And somewhere in the distance, if you listened carefully beneath the music and laughter and sound of rain against windows, you could hear the faint echo of choices being made by a desperate woman in borrowed lipstick, walking into a world she didn't understand, refusing to leave even when given the chance. That woman was gone now. But the woman she'd become, dangerous, powerful, gentle when it mattered, and fierce when it didn't, that woman remained. And she was finally, impossibly, home.